Hey, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. I'm looking forward to everything that we're going to talk about. So here we go.
Century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you're all with us here tonight. We're going to have yet another one of our great late night chats. It's so good to be here with all of you. We've been doing great stuff. I had a great weekend and, great things are ahead. I'm so excited for everything going on with CPI. We're moving toward a great time. And good stuff is happening. So anyway, quick reminder, if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin and send a question. Felix already did it, so he'll be the first one to be answered. Looking forward to answering Felix's question. You can also super chat because we're monetized. Super chats are always appreciated. In addition to that, you can do Rumble rants. You can cash at me. There are many different ways to send questions. Make the second half of the show exciting. Send questions for the second half of the show. Now, we are getting ready with the Center for Political Innovation. We're having a big 7-day national training program in August, which you can register for. People are registering for it. We're looking forward to it. Got all the preparations going. It'll be in Chicago, in the Chicago area, and it's going to be pretty awesome. So if you'd like to join us for 7 days, help us convene our national convention on August 15th, get involved in a lot of other great activities, get to know other people from the group, you can register for our national 7-day training program, August 12th through 19th. We are doing that in Chicago. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope that you'll be there. I hope that you'll join us for that. We're planning to have a France out of Africa rally during our 7-day program, as well as the convention, everything else that we're doing. That's going to be pretty cool, right? We'll be protesting against the French consulate in solidarity with the Union of Sahel States and the great African leader Ibrahim Traore. That's going to be pretty awesome. So I hope you'll be there for that. So that's all coming up. We are the Center for Political Innovation, a great, spectacular organization, a real community of people. I just think about all the people that are in our group and how dedicated they are and the outreach that they do and the community that we built. And I really love it. We are the Center for Political Innovation. We are America's anti-imperialist movement. Here we go. Yep, that's us, the Center for Political Innovation, CPI, and we are doing great stuff. And I hope that you will get involved and become a member because I love what we're doing. And yeah, it's great stuff. And August is going to be a great month for our organization. Our community is growing and new connections are being made, and I'm feeling good about it. I am feeling very, very good about it. So hope that you will get involved because it's going to be great. Yeah. Now, if you have anything for me to talk about in the second half of the show, you can either go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. That's the best way to send your questions. Felix already did, so his question will be first. As for the second half of the show, you can super chat me on YouTube because we are monetized. You can do Rumble rants. You can cash at me. There are various ways to send questions, but please do send questions for the second half of the show. Make the second half of the show fun and entertaining. All right. All right. So, yeah. Well, folks, before I get to the topic that I wanted to talk about, this is more of a chill stream, right? I think that's a term that they use now, that those hip kids with their rock and roll music and their long hair. And I'm just kidding, but I sound like an old person. I feel like an old person more and more every day. I'm only 38 years old, but the world is so different than when I was a kid. But no, the term that I guess people use, they talk about chill streaming, where, you have streams where you get on there and you make a big epic speech about some political point, which I did last time. And I did the time before that. We had a great show about MK Ultra. We had a great show about July 4th and Donald Trump's anti-communism speech, etc. Tonight, we're having a show where I'm going to talk about things. I got a number of things to talk about here in our first half, but they're just kind of me reacting to different things that are happening in the news and all of that. The main topic is obviously Tucker Carlson's announcement that he's no longer a Republican and that he's starting a new political party, and we're going to talk about that. But before we get to that, I want to say that, our the media tour that I have been doing, right? I came out with this new book, which is, it's got a lot in it. It's speeches and articles and stuff I've been doing over the years, imperialism and anti-imperialism. Came out with this book, and I have been going on all kinds of different channels. I went on Kim Iverson. That was a big one that I went on. I went on Truthwire with Pasta. I went on with Nico House. That was great. I went on Homeless Left with Matt Weinglass. Who else did I go on? I mean, I just started going on show after show after show. I went on Academic Agent, right? He had me on to discuss the book. I went on, oh my goodness, I went on Trad Catholic Night, which is an important anti-war Roman Catholic show. It's not even a YouTube channel. It's just kind of a show. Went on Trad Catholic Night. That was great. I mean, I have been doing a very wide-ranging media tour. Kim Iverson. And I actually sat down and made a list of all the shows I've been on, and it's quite a big list. Homeless Left and Nico House and Sabi Sobs. Don't forget Sabi Sobs. That was great. I went on Sabi Sobs. Well, two channels that I've been on before that are quite big are Do Dissidents, which is great. Keaton and Russell, and they've had me on to talk about Trotsky, to talk about other things, talk about my book on Yemen, and the Jimmy Dore Show. So I'm going to announce, I guess it's public now. They announced it last night on their show. I'll be going on both of them at once on Friday to talk about communism, which is something I know quite a bit about. They had their show, Do Dissidents, and their show, Do Dissidents, Keaton this week is guest hosting Jimmy Dore's show. I'm booked for Friday. And on Do Dissidents last night, he and Russell showed clips of me talking about Donald Trump and the anti-communism and all of that. So, they just showed us on their stream, which they've been doing a lot of that lately. They showed me reacting to the attacks on the Amazon organizer, Chris Smalls. And now they are showing me talking about communism. And then Keaton announced that when he's hosting Jimmy Dore's show on Friday, I'm joining him on Friday, which is very, very exciting. It'll be the fifth time I've been on the Jimmy Dore show. That'll be great. Twice I was on when Jimmy Dore was hosting. A third time I was on the fourth time I've been on the Jimmy Dore show. And the other time was when Keaton was hosting. And this time is also Keaton hosting. So this will be my fourth appearance on the Jimmy Dore show. There's been a few other times he's shown videos of me talking about Ukraine and other stuff. This will be my fourth appearance on the Jimmy Dore show as a guest. I'm really looking forward to it. And it shows how valuable what we do as a community is. And I'll be there as CPI. I'll be on there talking about the new book, and it's going to be really, really great. So I thought I would start the stream tonight before we get to Tucker Carlson and all of that. Let's just show due dissidence. And shout out to Dan, who was the first person to catch this and, showed me that they were talking about us. This was Due Dissidence, a drawing from our analysis on their show last night. So here we go.
I'm going to give a shout out to Caleb Maupin, our friend here. We've had him on the show a bunch of times. I'm going to be interviewing him on Friday about this, but he did a stream last night that I was lucky enough to catch the first part of anyway. Oddly enough, I couldn't catch the whole thing. You know why? Because I had to go out and watch the fireworks with the children. See, once again,
they made you do that.
One thing after another, after another, after another. Yeah. But here's Caleb Maupin being the voice of reason.
Did you call them little shits for making you do it?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, we didn't go to a thing. We just went out, on the front porch and just watched from there.
Yeah,
no.
You're complaining that you had to go on your front porch to watch the fire.
I'm joking. I'm just saying the irony
what
that
a,
I
what
couldn't.
a curmudgeon.
I'm just saying,
I'm joking.
The irony that I couldn't watch the whole thing because I saw fireworks. Yeah, he was the voice of sanity this week, and I recommend that you check out this stream. He breaks everything down in great detail as he always does. And here he is basically saying what I've been thinking for the last few days about just how idiotic all of this discourse has been over these past few days, especially since the rise of the communists at the DSA.
Communism that we are watching and the argument about communism that we are watching is so dumb. It is beyond dumb. It is a manifestation of ignorance like I've never seen, because both sides agree on one thing. Communism is taxes. And that's what the argument is about. The Democrats believe that communism means that you tax rich people and use the taxes to give people social programs like healthcare and education. That's communism. And the Republicans also agree that communism is taxes, and they believe communism is when the government takes from wealthy people and redistributes their income, and that's communism. And so we're having an argument about should we have more of a welfare state or less of a welfare state. And somehow we are pretending that this is an argument about what went on in the 20th century. And it is one of the dumbest things I have ever seen. The argument is, it's on the level of a 5-year-old on both sides. Okay. And, if you're on the left and you take offense to that, well, I don't care. And if you're on the right and you take offense to that, I don't care. There are people on the right that actually know what communism is and disagree with it and have sophisticated arguments against it. And there are people on the left who actually know what communism is and have sophisticated arguments for it. Those are not the voices that are dominating social media. Right now, imagine 2 5-year-olds fighting. We've got one group of 5-year-olds who says some people have more money than others. That's no fair. And we have another group of 5-year-olds that says, the government is taking away some of my money. That's no fair. And that is the level of the argument, right? Is it no fair when the government takes your money away, or is it no fair that some people have more money than others? And that is the level of the argument. And it is dumb. It is dumb and childish and stupid. And nobody is taking the time to learn anything.
Exactly. Like, you're seeing just absolute ignorance on display when it comes to this invocation of communism and the laziness of people. Like, I don't even, like, I'm sorry to have to go here, but if you are of a certain age, which is the cohort that Donald Trump is pandering to with all this Red Scare bullshit, you're talking about boomers, you're talking about older people. Like, you have not bothered to learn the first thing about this concept that you've been so terrified of your entire life. Like, you haven't bothered learning literally the first thing about it, which is control of the means of production. What Caleb Maupin says is 100% right. To act as if this debate over how much we tax people in order to spend on social welfare programs is a debate about communism versus capitalism is just completely fucking illiterate. It is juvenile. Like, it's just extraordinary how this becomes the thing that every media organ is now writing think pieces about. And, 24-hour news cycle after news cycle now since the, 3 DSA people won, 2 in New York, 1 in Colorado. Now you're going to talk about how communism is at the gates. It is such nonsense. It is just so depressing to watch and to see a society just swallow itself in just absolute ignorance. Like, it's just embarrassing. It really is embarrassing. And again, young people may have some excuse. They're young, they're learning. If you are in the boomer cohort, which is statistically, I'm sorry, the cohort that is most susceptible to this propaganda, I'm sorry, what the fuck is your excuse for being this fucking ignorant at this point in your life? You haven't bothered to learn the first thing about any of this in 50 years? You just let these people bullshit you about how, Medicare for all is communism. Medicare for all transfers no ownership of the medical industry to the government. You still have private pharmaceutical companies. You still have private doctors. You still have private hospitals. It's not private everything. It's the government guarantees payment to those private enterprises. Right? That is not communism. I can go on forever about this, but this is why I'm in a Jewy mood this evening, because it's grating. It is overbearing and annoying and embarrassing.
All right.
That we are mired in this debate at this stage.
All right, man. Here's my opening to get Keaton to travel. So Keaton, you know how I keep saying when I go traveling that one of the most disconcerting things when you come back into America is, okay, you ever drive down a road where you've got like fog up ahead, like you can literally see the fog you're about to drive into?
Right.
That's America. It's not like this any place else I've ever been. I'm not saying every place else is freaking utopia, but this type of conversation that's so obviously in bad faith and low IQ, that's just not the deal any place else I've ever been. Most of what passes for civic debate in America, people would think you were mentally ill if you behaved and talked that way. Pretty much any place else I've ever been, except for England. It's the only place where they're kind of in that neighborhood. Nah, man, that's purely an American thing, because America has such a unique combination of enormous wealth and horrific abuse of its citizens and lack of a social safety net for its citizens. The only way they can try to maintain that is to keep everyone chasing their own tail and arguing over nonsense, keep everyone ignorant, keep everyone fighting, make everyone think that civic discourse is all about posturing and chest pounding. And they're very effective at that. We just saw that with the reaction of the Mamdani speech, which frankly was pretty milquetoast and standard. Yeah. It was a speech Obama might have given. Like, really, that was kind of an Obama-esque kind of speech. America's greatness has too often been overshadowed by the suffering of some of its people who've been left out of its promise. Right? Like, that's all that was. It was nothing. So why do you have all these trust fund kids, as we saw? Donald Trump, Spencer Pratt, Elon Musk. Why are they all trying to get working people so angry? It's the only way you can maintain this level of inequality, where most people, there's nothing in it for them to continue this system. The only way you can get them to not go to your house and burn it down, if you got the house on the hill, is you got to keep them fighting each other. You got to keep the peasants in the mud fighting over nonsense. So you go to other places that don't have this enormous military budget that they have to fund. They're able to put money back into their societies. They don't need people fighting like this. Quite the contrary. They'd rather have social stability. They'd rather have calm. They don't want that kind of constant conflict in their society. They see that as potentially causing social instability. But these guys, they're happy to have social instability as long as they can direct the peasants to only get violent with each other. That's the whole purpose of it. So yeah, man, the whole conversation is fake and gay. Absolutely. That having been said, in all fairness, I don't think you got a lot of people on the left actually claiming to be communists. And the ones who do claim to be communists usually have an idea of what it means. But you do have a lot of people on the other side telling them that they're communists.
Well, yeah, no, I'm not saying you should or should not.
Well, no, Caleb said, like, you got these. No, only one side thinks that the other side are communists. Really.
No,
like
but
most of these
Caleb
people
is saying,
don't think they're communists.
No, what Caleb is saying is that, you know, one of the lines that Democrats use to sort of stigmatize the DSA people is that they're too far left. Now, I don't know if they call them communists, but they basically insinuate in that direction, as if what they're advocating for is anything beyond the norms of a I don't know, 1992, 1988 Democrat. These people are not to the left of George McGovern. They're not to the left of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So they're barely social. They're not socialists. They're really social democrats. Like if DSA had just branded themselves social democrats, they'd have probably gotten a lot more power a lot faster, because the stigma associated with socialism is such that it has held them back for quite some time. So, you know, so I think that's kind of the point that Caleb was making there is that you have operatives in both of these parties talking as if these ideas aren't just kind of like normie center-left ideas, which is essentially what DSA's platform is. Like I said, they're barely socialists, much less communist. And you know, the fact that the conversation's been dragged to this point is not all that surprising, I guess, when you look in context of, you know, conservatives calling anyone to the left of Mitt Romney a communist for, you know, as long as I've been alive. I mean, they've been saying this all along. So now when you get people who identify as socialists, I guess this hyperbolic rhetoric is to be expected, but it doesn't make it any less frustrating to watch and to think, you know, there are people twice my age who are more educated than me who still take this seriously, that, Ayanna Pressley's a communist, you know, AOC is a communist. It's absurd. It's just absurd.
Yep. That was Due Dissidence digging into analysis of what I said. And I will be on the Jimmy Dore show with Keaton on Friday, and I'm really looking forward to it. You know, I give a good interview, and I've been making my rounds about the new book. It's been good. I did want to also draw attention to probably one of the best interviews I've done ever, which was when I did a sit-down interview in Moscow in April with Tara Reid and Olga Bataman in Moscow. We had a sit-down to talk about Soviet history in the lead up to the Victory Day celebrations in Russia. It was a really, really great face-to-face interview. I'm going to put on a clip from that. And then after that, we'll get to talking about Tucker Carlson and this call for a new third party. So here we go.
You decided to write a book and to stand up against rewriting or attempts to rewrite the history.
lies about the Soviet Union and Soviet history, in particular regarding the Second World War, are essential to, what's going on now around the world. The neocons, they have this whole narrative about the Second World War where they equate the Soviet Union with Nazi Germany. They say that America is the antithesis of both systems and that Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were the same. And that's a big part of the mythology that is used to justify all the wars that are happening around the world. And it's just a whole pack of lies. My whole life I was told that the Soviet Union never accomplished anything. They were just poor and starving the entire time because communism just doesn't work. It just naturally doesn't work. And I accepted that to be the truth, but I got vaguely interested in socialism or whatever as a young person. So I remember I went to the library and I got a copy of one of Leon Trotsky's book, Revolution Betrayed. And the first chapter of that book, I figured, Trotsky, Stalin killed him, right? So chapter 1 of his book, Revolution Betrayed, was what has been achieved. And it was all economic statistics and about how much the Soviet Union had multiplied electrification, about how much, they were producing in terms of steel and raising people up out of poverty. And I thought, well, this can't be true because everybody knows that communism just doesn't work. They were all just starving the whole time. And so I went and checked those statistics. And I got the old encyclopedia that they had at the library, and I was checking, and I saw the Soviet Union had massive industrial success. I mean, so many people. We went from being an impoverished country to a modern industrial society in a very short time. And I thought, I've been lied to. And so much of the American mythology and the justification of military interventions around the world is based on this mythology about Soviet history. This idea that somehow the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany were on the same side in World War II, which is like, how can anyone think something so absurd? I mean, the Soviet Union gave more lives than anyone to defeat Hitler. And just so much of the mythology is part of what leads Americans to support wars, what U.S. leaders use to justify wars around the world. That's why we have to just take it on head on. We just have to counter it. And that's why I've been so interested in all of this.
Yeah, it seems that without normalization, so to say, of fascism, without legalization of fascism, so without rewriting it in this way, they cannot support the right sector in Ukraine, for example, because they are openly glorifying, not just supporting, they're glorifying Bandera, who aligned with the Nazis. Right. We see the same thing in other countries, but what's going on in the Middle East right now, because the Zionists, I wouldn't call the Jews, because the Zionists, they're using the same methods, and you cannot justify them if you don't normalize what the Nazis did, right?
Well, sure. And I mean, the way that they have kind of covered up and just, tried to justify support for fascist sympathizing forces that take the opposite side in the Second World War, is they have this narrative, well, the Soviets were just as bad or the Soviets were somehow worse. Dr. Timothy Snyder of Yale, I take him on in the book quite a bit. I mean, he's made his career with this historical revisionism.
Bloodlands,
Yeah, just this historical revisionism, trying to equate the Soviet Union with Nazi Germany, when from 1935, August 2nd, 1935, you had the Communist International, they had their 7th World Congress, and they announced we have to build a global movement against fascism. And all over the world, people that were inspired by the Communist International were opposing Hitler and opposing the Nazis. You had the Battle of Cable Street in London, where the workers went out and battled against Oswald Mosley, the Nazi sympathizer in Britain. You had volunteers going to Spain to defend the Spanish Republic, the Abraham Lincoln Brigade from America, and others going to fight Nazis and fascist sympathizers in Spain. And when the Nazis had a rally in Madison Square Garden in New York City, you had thousands of communists that came to counter it. All over the world, the communists were building an anti-fascist movement. And in fact, during the McCarthy period that came after the Second World War, they had different categories of potential communists and subversives. You had a communist, you had what was called a fellow traveler, which maybe you weren't in the party, but you were too close or too friendly. One of the categories they had for a subversive in America was what they called a premature anti-fascist. You were anti-fascist, but too soon. So you might be a communist.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the things I noted, too, and we've discussed this actually, was how there's a myth in the United States about the Soviet Union taking over Eastern Europe, right? And that myth still perpetuates today in this time. And, I agree with you, Caleb, because I grew up in the United States and was educated there. I grew up with propaganda. I'm older than you, but it was very strong propaganda about World War II. America was the hero. America saved the world from the Nazis. 27 million people in the Soviet Union were not even mentioned. So it was in college where I got my Great Awakening, and from my parents, actually, who were well-read, who kind of let me know, what you're learning isn't quite the truth. So you have this strong propaganda, but one of those pieces I wanted you to talk about was this myth about the Soviet Union.
You mean the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact,
Yeah.
right? They use, that's their strongest argument, and they say, they use it as an argument to prove that the USSR even wanted to invade Europe first, so they appeased Hitler. That's how they used this argument, which was definitely not the case.
From the moment Hitler took power, the Soviet Union was saying to all the Western countries, we need to form an alliance against him. And the Western countries rebuffed them. And for year after year, they mobilized the anti-fascist Popular Front movement. In America, that meant supporting Roosevelt against fascism and labor unions and all of this. And after year of trying to build this global anti-fascist alliance, which the Western countries weren't interested in, they made a non-aggression pact in 1939, which is basically they drew a line down Europe, and the understanding was the Nazis don't go on this side of it, and the Soviets don't go on this side. That's all it was. And when the Nazis invaded Poland, right, the government in Poland collapsed and went into exile in Britain. And the government in Poland never declared war on the Soviet Union. We're always told it was a joint invasion of Poland. It wasn't, because if it had been a joint invasion, the government in exile of Poland would have declared war against the Soviet Union, which they never did. The government in Poland was overthrown by the Nazis. They went into exile, and then the Soviet Union brought its troops right up to that line, saying, you won't go any further. And there was a handshake, an understanding, like, we have this pact, this agreement, which the Nazis eventually broke, which they knew they would eventually break, and that Anna Louise Strong, a writer that I quote, she called it the pact that blocked Hitler. It was to buy time, and it was because of the failure of the Western countries to really sufficiently oppose the Nazis, and that they were trying to build a global anti-fascist movement, and they temporarily bought time and were able to prepare for what they knew was inevitable. You watch Soviet films from the 1930s, they knew there would be a German invasion. It was almost inevitable that when the Western economies started to collapse with the Great Depression, they would start to mobilize an attack against the Soviet Union. It was coming. They were preparing for it, and that's why they had the 5-year plans to mobilize and build up the country to prepare for that invasion.
At high speed.
Yeah, the idea that there was any kind of sympathy or alliance, that's just not the truth. The 1939 pact was a necessary move that was very strategic. Russians are very good at chess, and I think it was a brilliant chess move. Yeah. And we talked for an hour, and we talked about the Nazis and the Zionist collaboration with the Nazis, which is kind of a taboo subject, but very important in light of what Israel is up to. We talked about that. We talked about so much. So, yeah, my media tour is continuing. The book blast that we started with CPI, it's going very, very well. And I'm looking forward to doing the Jimmy Dore show with Keaton on Friday. And, it shows that what we do here is very, very, very special. We are in high demand. So dare to struggle, dare to win. If you are a member of CPI, you are on the right team because we're marching ahead towards our convention in Chicago. And our members, I can't wait to show you the video of what our members did out in LA this weekend. I know that video is being compiled. I can show you the video of what we did. I got the full video of our rally that we did. We'll get to all of that later. But now we're going to talk about the main thing I was going to talk about tonight, which is Tucker Carlson looks like he's starting a new political party. Tucker Carlson is a conservative, a lifelong conservative, used to be on MSNBC as a conservative, worked with Pat Buchanan. Then he went on Fox, and he was kind of the replacement for Bill O'Reilly, and he was on Fox News, and he had the top show on cable news, and he increasingly became more and more anti-war throughout Trump's first term and then into the Biden administration. He defended the Uhuru movement when the FBI went after them, and they eventually booted him off the air. And since he's been off the air, he's become more anti-war. He campaigned for Donald Trump in the 2024 election. Gave some very good, powerful speeches supporting Trump on the basis of being anti-war. And when Trump won and Trump betrayed the promise and, proved himself to just be a complete shill for the Israel lobby, Tucker Carlson has done amazing things. He interviewed Russian President Putin. He interviewed the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. He interviewed George Galloway. And he is so anti-war. Trump has denounced him in harsh language on Twitter, and he says he's not a Republican anymore, and he's starting a new political party. This is a very important development. And this is the kind of thing that CPI has got to be all over. We do not endorse any candidates, and we do not interfere in the U.S. elections in any way. We don't run people for office, but we do educate people. And, during the 2024 elections, we hit the streets with a big banner that said only peace can make America great again, and tried to boost the peace message within Trump's campaign. Trump and Kim Jong-un shaking hands, a great, great action that we did. And what else have we done? We published a book on Kamala Harris. We published it in 2020. And then 4 years later, they banned it. So we distributed it in bulk. We published a book about the Houthis. Who are the Houthis? What are they fighting for? So we do all kinds of educational work. So if this new third party proposed by Tucker Carlson goes ahead, we got to be all over it. We got to be at every meetup, and we got to meet people and educate them about anti-imperialism, because there will be a lot of people there who are anti-war and critical of the U.S. establishment, but probably are confused about China, probably are confused about what we need. And our 4-point plan to rescue the country is what they need to hear. And anti-imperialism is what they need to be taught. And so, when Tucker starts it, I mean, it's going to be like, what do they call it? It'll be like the starting gun at a track and field match. As soon as Tucker launches that party, we're gonna go. We're gonna run to all the meetups and make a lot of friends and educate people about anti-imperialism. I'm really, really excited about it. It's gonna be great. Now, I saw that Glenn Greenwald, who is a great anti-imperialist voice, I saw that he had a chat with this about this issue. And so I'm going to put on Glenn Greenwald, but I'm going to stop and react. I haven't actually watched this full clip. He did a whole long conversation about it. This is just a clip from that conversation where Glenn Greenwald gave his thoughts. And he argued that DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, as an opposition group, has really failed to really oppose the Democrat Party. However, he argues that Tucker Carlson may be able to push Republican opposition to build real opposition. So this is Glenn Greenwald's interview, and we're just going to play it. I'm watching this with totally fresh eyes. I haven't seen this yet. And I'm not showing the whole thing. I know it's like a whole half-hour chat they did. This is just a short segment, and I'll react to this, and then we'll talk about some other things. So here we go.
People who are talking about a third party, if it's only going to be, Tucker and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Megyn Kelly and Tom Massey and Joe Kent or whatever, it's not going to be anything. It's going to be like a little rump of the far right that just doesn't want to join in the Republicans. The only way it can really make an impact, and they very much know this, is if they also find ways to bridge gaps with people on the left who hate the Democratic Party for the same reason they hate the Democratic Party and the Republican Party.
Now, that's interesting, and I agree with him there. There are many false starts in third parties, and this is not common knowledge. You would have to know about this. But for example, in the 1990s, there was a big, big drum roll and a big bump. They were starting a Labor Party in America. I don't know if people remember this, right? This is before the time I was politically active, but I read about it, right? And they were starting the Labor Party, and they got labor unions to donate money, and they had a big convention, and it was nothing. It was just a stunt by the Democrat Party. It was a stunt by the labor union bureaucracy that's in bed with the Democrat Party to get enthusiasm going. Bill Clinton had signed NAFTA. And so because Bill Clinton had done NAFTA, which hurt American labor unions so much, the labor bureaucrats had to do a song and dance and put on a big show. And so they got some money together, and they had a big conference, and they founded the Labor Party. And it was supposed to run against Democrats in elections, but it never did. And I don't even think it even exists anymore. It was just a big show. And in New York State, they formed the Working Families Party. And again, it was supposed to be like, aha, we're going to challenge the Democrats because they're so bad to the labor unions. But every election, if you're looking for temporary work in New York, I see the ads everywhere. Come work for the Working Families Party. And what it is it's the labor unions giving a second ballot line to whoever the candidate is. In New York State, the way it works, and it's not like this in every state, but in New York State, a candidate can be on the ballot multiple times. So in New York State, the Democrat Party puts Hillary Clinton on one line, and then the Working Families Party puts Hillary Clinton on the ballot twice. And every election cycle, they put the major candidate of the Democrat Party on the ballot twice. And the labor unions spend a lot of dues money, and they hire a lot of teenagers to go get signatures to make sure that the Democrat is on the ballot twice. It's a fucking joke. And this happens, right? And that it's not a real political party. It's a stunt. That it was a big stunt that the Democrats did in the 90s, forming a labor party and eventually forming the Working Families Party of New York. But they're not real parties, right? And, you know, there are some other strange parties. In New York State, we also have the New York State Right to Life Party, which is like, if you're a Republican, right? I mean, Republicans tend to be against abortion. So wouldn't you just vote for the Republicans? Well, there's the New York State Right to Life Party that always runs in the elections. It's not a real party. It's some kind of weird gimmick. And a lot of times, I'll be honest, a lot of times these third parties are sometimes, there's something shady going on. You know, for example, a libertarian candidate will run to take votes away from a Republican, and the Republicans will help them get on the ballot. A Democrat will you know, be facing opposition from Republicans, and they'll make sure to get a Green Party person on the ballot to take votes away from them. There's, you know, third parties become almost a field for intrigue, a field for silliness to take place, a field for people to just be silly as the two major parties run it. And that, I mean, the way the U.S. electoral system is set up, you know, in the way that, you know, other countries are one-party states, America is a two-party state. For example, when they count the ballots, they have Democrats there counting the ballots, and they have Republicans there counting the ballots. And even if it's a third-party candidate, it doesn't matter. They're not in the room when the ballots are counted. All the judges and all the observers are from the two major parties. Cindy Sheehan, who is somebody who's been on this channel before. I think I've been on her channel. I was on her radio show. Great anti-war activist. When she ran against Nancy Pelosi, they wouldn't put her numbers on the polls, and she was ahead of the Republican. She ran it was Nancy Pelosi was the leading candidate, and she was polling higher than the Republican was, because it's a very Democratic district in San Francisco, and none of the polls would list her. And they would just put other, and they wouldn't even list her as the candidate. I mean, it was absurd. She was polling higher than the Republican was against Nancy Pelosi, and they wouldn't even mention it. And yeah, I mean, it's the USA is a two-party dictatorship, and the two parties, they fight with each other. They have their differences, but there are certain things they agree on, like Israel, like military spending, like austerity. And, you know, there are things they disagree with each other about, and they're fighting each other more than they used to, right? There's no question about it, but there are certain things they agree on, and the rank and file of both parties doesn't agree. Rank and file Republicans don't want continued U.S. support for Israel. Rank and file Democrats don't want continued U.S. support for Israel. Rank and file Democrats don't want a war with Iran. Rank and file Republicans don't want a war with Iran. Everybody, no matter where you go in America, knows that our freedoms are being taken away, that our country is run by a group of rich people who don't care about us, that these wars being waged around the world are not being fought to benefit us, and that the country is overall getting poorer every day. Our roads are falling apart. Our bridges are crumbling. The power grid all over America, people are losing their power because it's hot. It was a heat wave the last couple of days, and there was a lot of people using their refrigerators, and people in Michigan lost their electricity. People in Massachusetts lost their electricity. People all over America were losing their electricity just because of a heat wave. This country is falling apart. And, you know, the two major parties are presiding over that collapse. So anyway, what Glenn Greenwald is saying here, there's a lot of credibility to it. He's saying that if we're going to have a new party, it can't just be, you know, the Labor Party, which was just another ballot line for the Democrats, was just a gimmick by the labor unions that are in bed with the Democrats. It can't just be the New York State Right to Life Party, which is this weird party that's anti-abortion that runs in New York State, possibly to take votes away from Republicans or something like that. It's got to be a real populist coalition that includes people of the left and the right representing the majority that is against these wars, and maybe doesn't ideologically agree on social issues and other things, but is against these wars. That's very interesting to me. Let's see what else he says.
I'm not saying it's going to be easy. There's certain issues like immigration that have become irreconcilable. But there's issues between the left and the Democratic Party.
The immigration one is, I think, an important one, because part of what it means for the left to be an anti-imperialist is to understand that the cause of immigration is so often American interventions that are also financial interventions, not just military ones, right? Especially with regards to the southern border. And I guess I would be looking.
Why can't you just end those? Why isn't it just?
Well, yes, I would be looking for more assurances that that was part of the policy prescription as well.
Now, on the immigration thing, I'll just say this. All right, anti-immigrant bigotry is very stupid. It's very stupid. So that's the first thing, right? And that, it's been around a long time, right? Don't get mad at Wall Street. Don't get mad at capitalism. Just get mad at undocumented workers. And I grew up in a little town in Ohio, and I remember, and this was back in the Bush years, back in the 2000s, every Sunday you would drive by the community college in my area, and the soccer field would be full of hundreds and hundreds of people from Mexico and El Salvador who worked on the local farms. And Sunday was their day off, and that's where they gathered to play soccer every Sunday. And people would be like, where did all these people come from? And it was like our town, our population expanded, and we would see this huge crowd on Sunday. And there were people who worked at the local farms, farm workers, and that there were like some cheap apartment buildings in my town that were constantly having the police called because there would be, 10 or 15 people sleeping in a 1-bedroom apartment, and they were undocumented workers who worked on the local farms, right? And so even back then it was an issue, and there was a layer of people who supported the war in Iraq and thought it was amazing, who supported President Bush, and, but they were mad about those immigrants. Why don't they deport them? It was obnoxious to me. One thing that I remember, that I just remember is just the height of idiocy was, if you get a driver's license, which is something a lot of high school kids do, right? You go get your driver's license at the DMV, right? Which is a government building. They have various, how-tos, right? And it was like how to get your driver's license, right? How to get married, right? These little pamphlets that are printed for people who might not have a computer, right? How to do this. One of them was how to become a U.S. citizen, which, that's something that one would, if one goes to a government building, applying for citizenship is one that one must do. And I remember there was somebody in my school who got that form. He had gone to get his driver's license, and he got the form, how to become a U.S. citizen. And he walked into school. Oh my God, they have a whole pamphlet just to tell people how to become citizens. Oh my God. I'm like, of course they have that. It's a procedure. You file for citizenship. Like what? And it's like, oh my God, they're helping them come. Oh my God, they're helping them. Oh. And it was the height of ignorance. It was really just the height of stupidity. And I'm just like, you're outraged that they have a piece of paper in a government building called how to apply to become a U.S. citizen. That makes you mad. Yeah. Why are they helping them? It was just, it was just so annoying. Right. So I generally sympathize with immigrants, and my senior year of high school was 2006. That's the year I graduated from high school. That was the year of the immigrant uprising, right? The huge immigration protests against the Schumer bill, right? And it was Chuck Schumer, the Democrat, who had that bill that was a horrendous bill that would have basically, it would have made it illegal to give medical aid to an immigrant. It was this crazy anti-immigrant bill that was really just an attack on American civil liberties. It was a threat to the freedom of Americans, anyone living here, in the name of fighting undocumented workers and immigration. This law basically would have, criminalized, all kinds of activities. It basically made it so that it was a federal crime to cooperate or aid somebody who was an illegal undocumented immigrant. And that was just completely ridiculous. The law, the way it was written, it was a crazy law that was just written so basically, when they deport somebody, they can like arrest and jail his American U.S. citizen friends too for being his friend. It was a crazy law, and there was a huge demonstrations of immigrant workers against it. So I generally am sympathetic. immigrants. And what I would always tell the people is that, the reason immigrants are coming here is because of capitalism. It's because of imperialism. These countries are being destroyed. And that was the general, leftist argument. That was the general leftist argument, which was that, hey, these immigrants are coming here because, their countries are being destroyed. We should be mad at capitalism and imperialism, not the immigrant workers. And that's always been my position. That's still basically my position. I think what ICE is doing is not good. Here's the thing. About 10 years ago, all of a sudden, the memo got sent out that we're supposed to celebrate undocumented workers coming to this country, and that we're not allowed to acknowledge that there's a problem. The standard leftist argument was there's a problem. The problem is because of imperialism. Don't hate immigrant workers. Don't support crackdowns on immigrant workers. That's always been my position as well. I got informed in 2017, 2018, that's racist. That's racist because there is no problem, Caleb. If you say there's a problem with mass migration, you're spreading right-wing conspiracy theories. That's racist. And all of a sudden, instead of saying, okay, we have a problem, the problem is because of imperialism, immigrants are not the enemy, it's the system, suddenly you're not allowed to say that anymore. Now you just have to say immigration, woo, and anything other than that means you're a Nazi. And I'm just like, no, I'm not going to say that. No, I'm going to acknowledge. And the fact that, they do find dead bodies along the U.S.-Mexico border every day. The fact that people are so desperate, they can't live in their home in places like Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador and Mexico. They're so desperate to get here that they are risking their lives and jumping over fences. There's a humanitarian crisis going on. And it's not just here, it's in Europe too. The USA destroyed the most prosperous country in Africa, Libya. And as a result, people are drowning in the Mediterranean trying to get from North Africa to Europe because things have gotten so bad with the modern day slave plantations, slave markets that they've got, the open air slave markets in Libya and the drug lords and all of that. It used to be the most prosperous country in Africa. Now people are piling onto boats to get out. And the same with, when it comes to, the United States. I mean, the reason that things are so bad in Central America is because in 1979, Nicaragua had a revolution and the Sandinistas, Christian socialists, took power and wrote a new constitution. So the U.S. government started arming drug cartels to fight them. And those drug cartels set up shop in Guatemala, and they set up shop in Honduras, and they set up shop in Panama, and they were dealing drugs, and the CIA knew they were dealing drugs and enabled them to keep dealing drugs, and they had air bases in Arkansas, and they were flying cocaine into the United States, and the CIA let them do it, and they murdered Catholic priests and nuns, and the U.S. Congress passed a law, don't support them, no more funding for them. And Ronald Reagan figured out a way to fund them anyway by arms for hostages, by selling missiles to Iran to fight Iraq, and using the proceeds, for the arms for hostages deals with, Hezbollah had taken various American servicemen hostage, and so they would get the hostages freed by giving Iran missiles, and then the money they got from those deals they would then hand over to the Contras in Nicaragua, which was completely illegal. And millions of dollars ended up going to drug cartels. And those drug cartels, they waged an awful war in Nicaragua that killed hundreds of thousands of people. And they set up shop and they set up drug cartels and networks all over that region. They forced the Sandinistas to have an election in the 90s, which they lost, and they retook control of Nicaragua. The Sandinistas were out of power until 2006, and the drug cartels didn't go away, and they kept doing all the awful things they were doing. Jamaica, take Jamaica, right? In Jamaica, they had a president, a popular president named Michael Manley, who was kind of a socialist, and so the CIA funded a group called Shower Posse. And Shower Posse was a criminal gang based in Jamaica that, that did all kinds of awful things and dealed drugs and kidnapped people and all of that and committed all kinds of crazy political violence. And the CIA gave them guns and gave them training. They even carried out a massacre in New Jersey, right? There was a Jamaican community festival in New Jersey and they shot it up, right? And killed a bunch of Jamaican Americans in New Jersey during the 1980s. And then after, in the 1990s and, in the 2000s, the USA ended up having to carry out operations and now one of the leaders of Shower Passe is in a federal prison in America. And so you look at like all the drug cartel problems that exist in the Caribbean, that exist in South and Central America, in Colombia, the USA didn't like the FARC, right? So it wasn't enough for the USA to arm the Colombian government to fight the FARC. The USA funded these paramilitary groups that were drug dealers, that were involved with the narcos and the drug gangs. And so it's like this humanitarian crisis has been created where country after country in the Middle East, in Central America, in order to fight communism, the US government has gotten itself in bed with all kinds of murderous criminal organizations and created huge amounts of instability in so many countries, and people are fleeing here, and it's a problem. And big parts of Honduras don't have running water and don't have electricity. Big parts of Guatemala don't have running water, don't have electricity. In Nicaragua, the Sandinistas retook power in 2006, and they've electrified the entire country, 98% electrification. And they've wiped out illiteracy. They've done good things, but in the areas, the other parts of Central America, they're still suffering, right? The USA invaded Panama, right? Manuel Noriega was one of these, anti-communist military guys who was involved in the drug trade that the USA put into power. And then he stood up to the United States. And so they invaded Panama and removed it in 1989. And that all of Central America has had big problems because of U.S. imperialism, because when countries wanted to break free and start developing, the USA armed drug cartels and terrorists and extremists and invaded and killed and tortured and raped and did all kinds of horrendous things. As a result, they have a problem. And, it used to be just standard on the left to talk about this, but now you're not allowed to talk about it. Now, if you say anything other than we love immigrants and anyone who says there's a problem is a racist, you get canceled. And that's a problem. We should acknowledge there's a problem. My difference with Republicans, though, is Republicans say, oh, the way to solve this problem is we just have big crackdowns and make immigrant communities terrified. Well, none of that addresses all the issues that Republicans are upset about, right? For example, why are people upset about immigrants? One thing, they drive down wages. Well, do you know why they drive down wages? Because they're working off the books and their employers are not paying them minimum wage. Well, that's not legal. Employers need to pay them minimum wage, but they don't because they're afraid of being deported. Well, if you terrorize immigrant workers, they're not going to demand better pay. Now, are they? They're not going to report their employers. They're not going to refuse to work unless they get better pay. The more immigrant communities are pushed into the shadows, the lower the conditions they're going to accept from their employers. No, what you need to do is you need to have a union that includes undocumented workers as well as documented workers to demand the bosses pay a fair wage. And you need to have those immigrants not in the shadows, not terrified of being deported, but when the boss tells them he's going to pay them less than minimum wage, they go and report him to the Department of Labor. But he's not going to do that if he's afraid of being deported, is he? So forcing immigrants into the shadows is only going to make the issue of driving wages down worse. What's the other thing they say? Well, Caleb, we got to get rid of these immigrants because of MS-13, this ugly criminal gang that exists. Well, here's the thing. If immigrant communities are afraid to call the police and afraid to cooperate with law enforcement because they might get deported, what do you think is going to happen? Those groups are going to become more effective and stronger, right? If immigrants are afraid to go to the doctor, if immigrants are afraid to, go shopping, they're going to become more reliant on these criminal organizations, right? So it's like, so if you force immigrants into the shadow with raids and deportations and all of that, then these groups are going to proliferate and they're going to get stronger, right? And that it's everything that Republicans want to do to fight illegal immigration makes the problems that they're upset about because of illegal immigration worse, right? And it's just, it brings out the worst in people, right? I want to see people get hurt. I want to see people get bullied. I want to see people crying. I want to see people hurt. You shouldn't be acting that way, right? If you ever have a policy solution that is motivated by wanting to see someone suffer, right? That's spiritually a very, very bad thing, right? You know, I mean, it's like, for example, take the death penalty, right? I mean, there are many people who think that the death penalty is a good thing. They think it deters crime. Well, if you think the death penalty deters crime, I might disagree with you, but that's an okay reason to think that. But if you believe in the death penalty because you want to make someone suffer, that's spiritually very, very bad. And you're in a very bad place, and bad things will come to you from the world. You're drawing evil, negative energy, hate, destruction into your space. Right. And a lot of what I see from anti-immigrant Republicans is not, there's this problem and I'm concerned about wages being driven down. There's this problem, I'm concerned about criminal gangs. And so I have come up with a policy solution that'll fix it. No, a lot of times the policy solution they come up with is not about fixing it. It's about, I want to teach them a lesson. Take that. And that's spiritually bad. You're drawing evil. You're drawing negative energy when you do that. And I'm just warning you, right? If you're one of those people, and I've caught myself doing that before, you think I don't have anger and rage against people who've done awful, unforgivable things to me. I mean, I mean, we're all like this. It's a natural human response, but you're not going to attract anything good spiritually. And you're going to get into a darker and darker, worse place if anything you do is motivated by wanting someone else to suffer. It never leads to anything good. So that's my thoughts on the immigration thing. We need economic development. The solution to the problem of mass migration is the Belt and Road Initiative, is, Mexico joining China's Belt and Road, and America teaming up with Mexico and building an economic corridor down to Nicaragua and having jobs and schools and education in those areas, and having the drug cartels go out of business because people have economic opportunity. It's wiping out illiteracy. It's electrification. The cure for drug cartels, the cure for mass migration, the cure for terrorism is jobs and economic opportunity. When people have economic opportunity, they don't join drug cartels. When people have economic opportunity, they don't join terrorist groups. I mean, that's just how things work, right? And that if we want to not have a problem with mass migration, we need an economically prosperous and stable South and Central America. But anyway, we'll continue.
Not doing color revolutions. We're not doing war on drugs. We're not doing all of the things that we do to cause instability, sanctions, whatever it is in the global South. But also, how can you preserve, this has come up on a couple of recent podcasts, how do you preserve American primacy? How do you preserve all of the advantages of being American and American first when so much of that comes from the way that we exert downward pressure on the rest of the world through imperialism? Imperialism isn't just for shits and giggles, right? It's so that we can be enjoying the fruits of the rest of the world. Isn't there a fundamental sort of schism between a American protectionist, America first, we're just going to do resource hoarding and close our borders and everything's going to be good for America attitude, and the military control over the rest of the planet that has enabled that posture?
Yeah, so let me say a few things about that. It's obviously a very important question on multiple levels. And I just want to start again by emphasizing that obviously if you're on the left, you're likely to not just dislike, but be offended by the right-wing position on immigration, including one shared by Tucker and others like him.
Maybe not. I will say I am a little unique even on the left, I think, in being a bit of an open borders girly. I don't think that's actually a broad, Bernie Sanders very famously said open borders is a Koch brothers plot. I think there's actually a lot of agreement. I think leftists don't like the cruelty that comes with how deportations happen and family separations and stuff like that. But the idea
that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So what I would say to that, the host there, what is her name? The host of Bad Faith. I don't remember her name, but what she was saying was that, is that Joy Reid, or is that her name? I don't want to get her name wrong, but what she was saying was that, what do you call it? Doesn't the U.S., high standard of living come from exploiting people around the world. Brianna Joy Gray. That's right. I'm sorry. Part of me wanted to say Joy Behar, and I knew it wasn't that. I knew it was Joy something. I knew there was a Joy in there somewhere. Right. And then Joy Reid or Brianna Joy Gray. That's her name. I didn't want to say her name. Part of the problem is that she's arguing that basically the standard of living in the Western countries comes from exploiting the third world. It used to. It doesn't anymore, right? The aristocracy of labor, it was called, is gone, right? It used to be, yes, that while the USA was plundering and destroying countries all over the world, there was a prosperous middle class at home. The 1950s was the height of that, when industrial workers in America, white industrial workers in the auto plants and in the steel mills, were getting very, very high wages. That's ancient history at this point. Those factories are closed down. Those union contracts are gone. Middle America, people don't own their own homes anymore. They're renting their homes from banks. The rate of household debt, that's just not the case any longer. It was the case, but right now the standard of living across America is dropping. It is dropping, and that aristocracy of labor is gone. However, if she said she's for open borders, right, and that's where I would say, okay, open borders is something the right wing brings up a lot. They say, open borders, you believe in open borders. And I don't believe in open borders because it's not a real policy, right? Even if we did allow everyone to enter the United States, we would still have customs. They would have to get their passport stamped when they came in. You would still have a border, right? You would still have a border. Open borders is not a real policy. And that a lot of times the far left, in the name of being radical, in the name of getting their anger out, they advocate things that are not serious, that could never be implemented. One of them is open borders. Another is abolish the police. What does that mean? Abolish the police. What? So child molesters and rapists and all of them are just going to be able to just run rampant, people are going to be able to speed on the highway, and then when you push these people who say abolish the police, what they really mean is they say, well, no, we're still going to have law enforcement, but we're going to set up like a new entity, like a community controlled entity that will enforce law. And it's like, so you just want different police. You don't want to abolish the police. You just want communism. You just want dictatorship of the proletariat, right? You want police that are accountable to us, not to the wealthy 1%. You want police who are not, protecting the private property of the rich. Rather, you want police that are, that are protecting you and me. So why don't you just say that? That makes more sense. Why don't you just say you want communism, right? Why say abolish the police, which sounds nuts to most people, and then you have to explain it, and then what you explain is actually not abolishing the police. It's just having police that serve the people. You might as well just say you want communism, right? But there's this weird thing of and I've noticed that, and like the open borders thing, you really press people. I don't know about Joy there, but you really press people who say they want open borders. They don't mean no customs. They don't mean, that there's no borders. They mean that eventually they want to get to a world where all of humanity is united and we don't need to do that. Well, that's called communism. That's called the higher stage of communism, right? A world of vast material abundance without coercion, right? So why don't you just say that? And there's a million of these weird things. It's academics. It comes from left academics, right? The fact that college campuses and academia is where leftists, are getting their training and their funding from. It's kind of like the Gramsci notebooks, right? They all love Antonio Gramsci's prison notebooks because they're written in code. Antonio Gramsci was a communist in Italy who went to prison, and he wrote these notebooks about culture and society, but he had to write them in coded language because if he had written communist language, the prison censors would have ripped up his letters, so he couldn't do it. So he wrote it all in coded language. And so now if you go to college, they all love Antonio Gramsci. And it was Pete Buttigieg's father who translated and popularized Antonio Gramsci's writings. And if you're a college leftist, oh, I love Antonio Gramsci. And they have these words like praxis, the theory of praxis. Why can't you just say activism? Why can't you just say the revolutionary movement? Oh, no, we have to say praxis. And they have all these words It's like you can't say actual communist stuff because that's not cool. So, and we can't just say we want the higher stage of communism. We have to say, well, we want to abolish prisons. Well, how are you going to have that? And then if you actually read what Angela Davis says about abolishing prisons, she's saying, I want to get to the higher stage of communism. So why don't you just say that? Why did you have to say abolish prisons? Well, because it's edgy, right? And this is a big problem because to most people, open borders sounds crazy, right? So we just take down the border. Yeah, come in, come out, whatever. We can't do that, obviously, right? Maybe you want to relax immigration policies or whatever. We're still going to have a border, right? Abolish the police. Again, to most people, that sounds crazy, right? To abolish prisons. Again, to most people, that sounds crazy, right? But what they actually mean is something that is just a basic part of communist theory. But there's like, oh, we can't sound like communists. Why not? Just say you believe in this ideology that is, and that'll make sense to people, and tell them that what they think about that ideology is wrong. Why do you invent this roundabout way? And it's all about posturing for the other leftists, right? And that's the biggest problem, is that they don't care that average people think it sounds nuts. They don't care about that. They're concerned about posturing for the other leftists, about how radical I am. I'm better than you. And this is a really big problem in a lot of dissident spaces. And I said this happens among libertarians, this happens on the right, is that there's an assumption that we can't ever win over the majority of the population. We can't ever actually win over the majority of the population. So it's a matter of who gets the validation, who gets to be the superstar, who gets the attention by being king of the dissident space. And so the way to prove that you should get the attention is to prove that you're the most radical. Well, that other guy doesn't want to abolish police. I do. I should get the attention. Well, that other person, they're not for total open borders. Maybe they want to treat immigrants better, but they're not for total open borders. I am. And you're trying to win over the people that are already in the dissident space to think that you are the best and give you validation. They've given up on reaching the bulk of the population. That'll just never happen. You're never going to reach the bulk of the population. So it's how do I prove I'm the most pure and the most radical? And that's a really, really dangerous, slippery slope that our communities are involved in. And this happens on the right. This happens in libertarian spaces. This happens in Republican and conservative spaces. It's a really, really big problem. And I'm not going to get into this tonight, but I've observed certain things. One thing that happens in every dissident space now is they find a couple people that become the big social media face of that. This is on the right. You got Nick Fuentes on the libertarian spaces, right? You got Spike Cohen, you got Dave Smith, people like that, right? And they're the big libertarians or the big far right people or the big anti-imperialists, right? And they blow them up. And they blow them up on social media, and they don't do any activism. And then they cancel and smear the people that are actually doing the activism, and defame them basically, and just tell you should just watch me. And then they pull their community deeper and deeper into isolation. And that's Nick Fuentes is a great case study of this, right? I mean, I don't want white nationalism to grow as a movement. So it's like, I mean, on the one hand, I don't care. But it's worth paying attention to because the FBI does pay attention to white nationalist groups quite a bit. And white nationalist groups, because of, weird stuff, they will take positions on Israel and even on North Korea and stuff like that. They'll take international positions that are subversive and, whatever. White nationalism is a movement that is considered, dangerous by the state. Right. Not that they don't use those people and try to control them, which they do, but they do that on the left too. Right. It's the state will play games with them, but at the same time, they do consider it a dissident movement. So you watch Nick Fuentes, he's there to control white nationalists. And I saw a clip. I'm not going to show it on here, but I found a clip the other day where Nick Fuentes is on there. He's telling white nationalists, don't organize, just start a TikTok channel. Yeah, just get on social media, which is rigged. So he will always be the leader. And don't have actual rallies. Don't do any activism. Just watch me, right? Just watch me. And it's like, interesting. And Nick Fuentes, is just some kid. He's just some slimy teenager, and he insults people. And Nick Fuentes, if you're not part of his little fan club, right? If you're not if you're not part of his little fan club, he trains his audience to be as slimy and unattractive as possible. And he supported the attack on Venezuela. He doesn't support the attack on Iran because he hates Israel. He's got mixed feelings about Russia, but he's a complete slimy young person, and he trains his audience of young men to use racial and ethnic slurs, to insult each other, to bully each other. And you'll notice he's opposed to any actual organizing among the far right. He wants you to stay at home and watch him, and then he cancels and defames all the actual white nationalists who are organizing. Now, I don't want white nationalism to grow as a movement, but you have to understand this is what the FBI does to all dissidents. They have the same playbook for dissidents. As far as the FBI is concerned, I'm the same as a white nationalist, right? And then, and as far as the FBI is concerned, libertarians are the same as white nationalists. Anyone who's against the state, against the status quo in America, the FBI, CIA, the imperialists, anyone who's supporting the Iranians or supporting the Cubans or supporting the Venezuelans, anyone who's opposing Israel and saying we need to get out of the Middle East, anyone like that, anyone who's opposing what the FBI is doing, they view you as the same, and they have the same manual for dealing with us. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. They have basically the same manual, which is that they at this point, they're trying to channel people that have dissident ideas into isolation and into internet fandoms. That's what they're trying to do. They want to prevent any real communities of resistance from being formed. They want people to be atomized. And that's why we're doing the opposite. We're focused on building a real community of people who care for each other and will organize. But anyway, got some other things I wanted to talk about tonight. First of all, we had a great rally in New York City for July 4th. So I'm just going to show the video of that. Great turnout that we had. You can watch so many people in this. Paul, Mahir, Irving, Noah, Yehuda, an anti-Zionist Jew, attended. That was great. Reverend Dase, who is from Mali, who's an anti-imperialist, is a strong supporter of the government in Mali and its anti-imperialist stances. Reverend Dase is a local minister in New York City of Malian descent, and Eric, and it was just a great rally that we had. All male, I will say, no women. Women are always welcome at our events. For some reason, this event ended up, we usually have a couple women at our events, but for some reason, this was an all male rally. Just how these things go sometimes, but it was great. It was a really great rally. So I'm going to put the video of our July 4th rally in Times Square that we did. I'm going to put that on. Then I'm going to show you some other stuff. So here we go.
To celebrate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution and the establishment of the American Republic.
Came out here today to Times Square to talk about the American Revolution, to talk about the legacy of 1776.
Iran is not our enemy. Iran is not our enemy. Iran is not our enemy. Iran is not our enemy.
Our roads are falling apart, and despite this, we have a tremendous debt that we cannot pay back because of these wars.
1776, what happened? Freedom from tyranny.
What are these countries doing to us that you have to go kidnap leaders, murder leaders, for what?
Because we love our country.
Yes.
And it wouldn't be necessary to be out here in Times Square right before July 4th if we had people in the White House and people in the Congress who loved our country. But we don't. We got people in the Congress and people in the White House and people on Wall Street who don't love America. They're loyal to an international financial system, and they're waging war after war after war around the world to keep Wall Street rich while America gets poorer. And as the Wall Street bankers fill their pockets with derivatives and rip-offs, we get poorer every day. They're unpaving the roads as billions and billions and billions of dollars go overseas. It's an absolute disgrace. 1 in 4 American children goes to bed hungry every night. 1 in 4 American children is chronically food insecure.
Americans are sick and tired of war.
The United States got their asses kicked out of the Middle East by Iran. They're out, okay? All their military bases are totally destroyed. Thanks a lot, Israel. Thanks a lot, Israel, for starting that war and getting Dumbo Trump into it.
Now, we had the Second American Revolution, and that revolution created civil war and the abolition of slavery. This is critical for our economic development.
We love our country, and that's why we're against these wars, and that's something a lot of people don't seem to really get.
Genocide and murder as it
shooting children. They're burying them alive. And this is the group of war criminals that the U.S. Congress has decided to merge with.
And they're driving a policy of war and controlling our presidency to push for more war and get the United States troops involved.
Happy July 4th, everybody. I want to talk a little bit about the legacy of 1776, because there's a lot of liberal jibber-jabber out there. There's a lot of media out there, the 1619 Project and others, that would try and convince you that somehow the American Revolution was a reactionary thing, that it was a bad thing, that somehow the benevolent British Empire was some awful thing for us colonists to break love from. What was the reality of the British Empire system? What did the British Empire system mean to the people of China in the century of humiliation? What did it mean to the people of India who had their people starved and lost millions of people in intentional famine?
American heroes said from July 4th, 1776 was resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. Well, we need to say that again. We just need to add that resistance to Zionism and the state of Israel, that is also obedience to God.
U.S. can actually make peace with Iran, and it's for the interest of the American people. And it's in the interest of the American tradition in terms of, anti-interventionist, domestic focus.
And have a new government for working families.
That's right.
One that will invest in education, housing, jobs, the economy, and not pillaging and again raping and murdering everybody here and across the world, literally.
We spent billions and billions and billions of dollars on a stupid war with Iran that had no reason to happen. Iran didn't do anything to us. Iran wasn't trying to get a nuclear bomb. There was absolutely no reason to attack Iran in February except to enrich the pockets of Wall Street bankers and to make Israel feel more secure in their crimes against the Palestinian people.
40 years of triple rents, and nobody said a word about it, right? That means you are losing your property rights. They're taking away your right to land and liberty just by having triple rents. 3 times what any normal society would put up with.
That the wars around the world that we are fighting are for an economic system. The American people know their leaders are not loyal to them, to their constituencies. They're loyal to an economic system, and they're loyal to their donors, be that AIPAC or other donors.
True patriots would never send Americans to die for Israel. True patriots would never send Americans to die for Wall Street and for London. And that we're the real American patriots. We need to declare independence from the British Empire system. Russia is not our enemy. China is not our enemy. Iran and the Palestinians are not our enemy. Our enemy is Wall Street. Our enemy is Jeffrey Epstein. Our enemy is the international bankers that are grinding our country into poverty while they enrich themselves. And we're here as the true American patriots standing against Wall Street, standing against their ugly wars, and fighting for working families. We're the Center for Political Innovation. You should check us out.
He has systematically wrecked this country's military reputation and destroyed this country's moral reputation as well.
And there are so many people out there that would try and convince you that somehow the British Empire was a friend to black people in this country. It is the further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. It was the British Empire who threatened to park their navy and break up the Union blockade of the South. It was the British Empire. It was the Wall Street bankers who were funding the slavocracy of the South. And it was Russia. It was Russia who brought their navy into New York Harbor and parked their navy to make the statement that the oppression of black people in this country would not go on.
This means a lot to me personally because in my family, my mother's side is Iranian, and it's very, it's very important. Even though it can be divided a little, people have divided opinions here and there, but it's really important that as an American, I'm born and raised in New York City, lived here all my life, born and raised in the Lower East Side, and the whole point is that, we want no more wars.
There's Jews living in Iran peacefully, and 25,000 Jews. You have Christians living there, just like you had Christians living in Assad, Syria before the Zionist-backed Syrian rebels led by Ahmad al-Shah exterminated them.
There's a lot out there saying, oh, America's an idea, America's an idea. Joe Biden gets up, he says, oh, America's an idea that we export onto other people through violence and death and destruction. Absolutely disgusting concept. The American people are a real people rooted in the foundations of the land of this country. And the American people do not want war. The American people don't want to export some abstract ideal of so-called freedom, the freedom to go without food, the freedom to go without health care, the freedom to go without infrastructure. No! The American people want housing. The American people want health care. The American people want education, and that is really the legacy of 1776.
We should try for win-win cooperation instead of gunboat diplomacy.
Reclaim the revolution!
That's right.
Reclaim the revolution!
That's right.
And the Democrats are no better than the Republicans.
That's right.
When are people going to get it through your head? You're being deceived.
U.S. Navy people and U.S. Marines walking by, and I noticed that a lot of them would read our signs, and I saw a couple fist bumps. I saw a sailor take a picture with one of the Iranian flags. I mean, they seem to support them. I would say, like, the people who are most against the wars in this country are our veterans, because they are the people who have to fight them, and because they really love our country and they want it to be a better place. And that's, I think, why they enlisted in the first place. And they can see that that's not what they're really doing.
To talk about the injustices of the wars that this regime has propagated, not just on Iran, Venezuela.
People walking by were giving us thumbs up. Saw a lady give the devil horns, you know, doing the rock on sort of thing. The Center for Political Innovation, I think, is it's really something special. I think it's really something special. I don't think any other organization could come out here and do what we're doing today, making the point that we're proud to be Americans. I mean, a lot of leftist groups, they would come out here and maybe they would make similar points, but they would make it in a way that would be as alienating as possible. You know, they would make it seem like these veterans are the problem or something like that. I think that the fact that we're able to do this is really special.
Zionism is not Judaism, according it has always been considered a heresy. In Judaism, the very first anti-Zionists were actually the Jews, Orthodox Jews, because they ruled it is forbidden to have a Jewish state before the coming of the Messiah.
CPI is an organization that is committed to the truth through education to wake up the masses.
CPI, Center for Political Innovation, is an anti-war network that talks about rebuilding America, innovating to rebuild industry, rebuild prosperity for the United States, and working with the Belt and Road Initiative, for example, and being part of the multipolar world.
To make sure to wake up more people to see, like, these countries are not our enemies. Our enemy is Wall Street, first and foremost.
Impoverishing Africa, we should be doing what China is doing in Africa, and developing African countries and making sure that they can be viable trading partners. That would be fulfilling the legacy of 1776. That would be fulfilling the legacy of the American system and not the British Empire system that is about making sure that other people are poor so that you can stay rich.
The Mali is really doing okay. Burkina is doing okay. Niger is doing okay.
And Russia is helping.
Coming together.
Russia's helping, yeah.
Russia has really been a great help. Russia has been a very great help in terms of equipment, in terms of even international politics. Russia has really helped a lot. Russia and China, you know, and Iran and Turkey.
Van Damme, a socialist would want to roll back the rent to normal levels. Okay, not just freeze the rent, roll them back to what they were affordably 25% of your income.
Not our enemy. Iran is 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 not our enemy.
Offering community to all these people who have come here today. I mean, this is something that has really been life-changing for me, to be able to come out here, make friends like Irving, make friends like Caleb and Mahir and Paul, and all these people. These people are my family, you know. I love them, and it's really awesome that we're able to come out here and do this and stand with the American people against the system.
The military of the United States will now be merged with the genocidal state of Israel.
Ooh.
What a disgrace!
Terrorists.
That's right.
And I got the sense that people were really, really supportive of us.
We are the true patriots of this country. We are against the imperialists. We're against the big international monopolies. And we want a government that invests in the American people. A government of action that fights for working families. Not a government that serves Wall Street and London and the profits of the super rich. We need a government of action that fights for working families. No more wars to enrich the 1%, the billionaire elite, the Jeffrey Epstein class.
So I think this is really the new norm of the world. America needs to really wake up to know who to deal with. Because it's not about, I used to be partnered with this one. Where is your partner going? If they're going astray, you need to change because everybody needs to defend their own interests first. So America really needs to defend their interests, becoming alliance, becoming partner with those alliance countries. You know, becoming friends, becoming partner with developing countries, with countries that really have a clear vision. Not with Europe, that is really falling. Now Europe is very kind of crazy right now. They are waging wars here and there with no reason. So I think America does not win in partnering with them.
Instead of relying on brain drain and picking the pockets of the intellectuals of around the world so that they don't have professionals to develop their industries, we ought to have a government that empowers the American people and sees them as an investment. We do invest in our people, and that is what 1776 is about. We need a third American Revolution. We need a third American Revolution.
Dare to struggle, dare to win. 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 Dare to struggle, dare to win.
Yep, that's us. That's us. Yeah, we do good stuff. We do great stuff. So, I got a couple more things I'm going to talk about. I see we've gotten a few questions. So just a quick reminder, if you have something you would like me to talk about in the second half of our show, I would appreciate it if you would go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin and send your question. You can also send a super chat because we're monetized and we do take super chats. You can also do a Rumble rant. You can cash at me. There are many different options, but the best thing is go to Buy Me a Coffee, and 3 people already have, and I look forward to answering all 3 of those questions. So, I'll just answer this. I can't run for office because of my job, right? I work for a company that is contracted by RT, licensed, and that company is a foreign lobbyist. So as somebody who is employed by a company that is registered as a foreign lobbyist against our will, I don't consider the work that I do to be a foreign lobbying. I'm just a journalist, but the U.S. Department of Justice, that's the way these things work. Because of that, in the job position that I currently have, I could not run for office. Just FYI, right? Somebody who does what I do for a living, you wouldn't be able to run for office. It wouldn't be legal. And that's just throwing that out there. But I did want to mention, a couple other things. First of all, and again, send questions for the second half of the show. So I did a report for RT, kind of a deep dive into a case that's like getting almost no attention over here. This California-based businessman, he's from India, and he's now been charged with pretending to be a CIA agent and swindling millions and millions of dollars. And he apparently got very close to the Indonesian president. He swindled a lot of money from people all over the world. And he's just this con man, Gaurav Srivastava. And, but he got millions of dollars from people around the world, but it looks like a number of U.S. intelligence officials were helping him swindle people. He was lying and claiming he was a CIA agent when he wasn't, allegedly, according to the prosecutions. Gaurav Srivastava is his name, and I'm going to put my report about him on. Very, very interesting, because it appears, and this kind of just reveals the corruption of the deep state. He wasn't a CIA agent, but a lot of CIA agents were helping him swindle people. So this was my report.
But it turns out they were being swindled by an Indian businessman, as leaked US court documents have revealed. Our correspondent Caleb Maupin investigates next in the first of our special series of reports how the notorious spy agency always seems to find itself entangled in dodgy dealings.
Tempo, the newspaper from Indonesia, is doing a deep dive into Grav Servistava. He's a businessman born in India who weaseled his way into Indonesia's elite circles by pretending to be a CIA operative. Now, according to the report, he even cozied up to Indonesia's president. Servistava claimed he was responsible for getting Prabowo Subianto's name removed from the U.S. immigration blacklist after he'd been barred from entering America for over 20 years. Now, that was quite a flex, and it made the businessman pretending to be a spook look like a pretty useful friend to have.
Tempo's investigation found that Srivastava falsely claimed to serve as an unofficial officer of the United States Central Intelligence Agency. He also faced multiple lawsuits in US courts, including an ongoing racketeer influence and corrupt organizations lawsuit filed by his former business partner Niels Troost. Srivastava also built an impressive public profile. He claimed to have employed several high-ranking officials, including a former Supreme Allied Commander of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and several former US cabinet members whose names appeared in various documents.
The reports in the Indonesian press draw from interviews with Niels Troost, the oil trader. He alleges that Srivastava used his fake spy credentials to try and steal his $350 million corporation. He hired private investigators who dug into him and found a long trail of fraud. According to the legal complaint from Troost, it is claimed that he had lots of prominent former CIA operatives doing his bidding. They allegedly helped him scam a lot of prominent people, including the head of Sudan's Rapid Response Support Group in Africa. Srivastava was able to deceive people because the kind of stuff he was doing matches the kind of thing the CIA actually does. Recordings show that Srivastava had a pretty good script and told a pretty convincing story about being an intelligence operative.
I am part of a program, I've told you before, in which there's only 30 people part of that program that has been open and shut over the years by the American government. But it is called non-official cover, NOC. Okay? But you're not supposed to know all this. You're not supposed to even have privy to this information. It's very difficult to say. I have so many obligations where I cannot say stuff to you because of my clearances and stuff I hold.
Okay.
But you have to understand this by now. The fact that I can reach all these people, I can call, it's not a joke, man, call 8 senators in a day and 4 things and the president in the White House and the ambassador of this country. And this is not monkey business.
The accused con man did pretty well for himself. He got to deliver a keynote speech before the Atlantic Council when they met in Bali. He also got lauded by Pat Ryan, a member of the U.S. Congress. In addition to that, they booked singer-songwriter John Legend for the gig, and he lauded Mr. G from the stage. That's Grav Servistava.
Thank you to the Atlantic Council for organizing this forum, and a special thank you to Grav and your family foundation for hosting and convening such a timely and important conversation.
The California-based businessman told people he was in direct contact frequently with U.S. President Joe Biden and that he had a direct line to the White House. Now, as he worked his alleged grift, Servistava passed plenty of money up the food chain. He donated $1 million to Democratic Party causes, and he met with lawmakers from both parties. Srivastava claims he was telling the truth the whole time. He rejects claims that he was engaged in deception.
I had no power. I could not reach a random newspaper in Pakistan. I could not reach a random newspaper in India. And nobody was telling a story. Neverton was not telling the truth. They were just repeating a fictional narrative.
Did you immediately remember those conversations you had had with him initially? Were CIA agents? How long did it take till you remembered those and you're like, oh no?
Almost instantly.
Now, it certainly helped him to have some prominent friends. According to Troost's criminal complaint, among them was John McGuire, the former deputy head of CIA operations in Iraq. He played a pretty prominent role during the Bush years. Now, according to what Troost alleges, he was paid by Srivastava to sit down with him and back up his false claims of being a CIA operative.
Srivastava continued to work to bolster his image as someone deeply connected to U.S. intelligence agencies. Srivastava hired real ex-CIA operatives, including former Station Chief Defendant John McGuire, to lend credibility to his claims of being a CIA operative. At one point, Srivastava claimed that McGuire would replace Secretary of State Anthony Blinken when he resigned.
He was apparently also close to Mary Beth Long, the former Assistant Secretary of State and former CIA operations officer. Apparently, while Troost was being scammed, he was told that it would be Mary Beth Long who vetted him. And then there's former NATO commander Wesley Clark. Turns out he runs a consulting firm based in Little Rock, Arkansas, now that he's retired. And he was working for Srivastava, advising him on international affairs. And then there's Nicholas Brevard. He was also mentioned. He is a Swiss and French citizen who lives in Switzerland and is described as the U.S. government's inside man working with the FBI in the shady world of Swiss banking. Now, he's reported to have approached people about business deals and showed them pictures of Srivastava with then-President Joe Biden. Srivastava was not a CIA operative. Everyone now agrees on that. But the real question is, why were so many former CIA operatives and U.S. officials helping him deceive people about that? There's more to this story than just one liar telling lies, and that should be pretty obvious. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Well, an actual former CIA analyst, Laurie Johnson, told RT that if the scammer actually was part of the agency, he would be quickly prosecuted for leaking classified information.
People get into this because they see it as a way to make money. You know, that's the key. It is, they found out that they can, you can convince people that you got access to all these secrets and you can really give them the inside scoop. Anybody that's doing that, they're clearly manipulating you. Yes, I worked with the CIA. I was there for 4 years. I spent my first year in what was called the career trainee program. But candidly, to go out and try to make money off of that association by claiming that I'm divulging, secrets and insider information, one, that'll get you arrested if you actually did have those kinds of clearances and access. If they had an actual association with the CIA and were doing this, CIA would go after them and prosecute them. But the fact that the CIA ignores these people, I think, is just a further evidence that they're not what they claim to be. This is prostitution without sex, where people like this guy buy politicians, rent them, and the politicians think that, oh, this guy's giving me money because I'm such a great person. Yeah, so it's just, when somebody gets, when they got some money to back up their scam, they can go a long ways.
Yeah. So that was my report, and that case is very interesting, of this scam artist who was able to actually have government people back up his fraudulent claims, it looks like. But anyhow, I did have one more thing I wanted to show on here before I start answering questions. So just a quick reminder, if you got something for the second half of the show, go to buymeacoffee.com. That is the best way to send your questions. We got a few of them already. So it should be a good Q&A session for the second half of the show. But, questions are always appreciated. That's what makes the second half of the show lively. Last thing is that today, I did go on WBAI radio. I'd go on WBAI radio like at least once a week. They have me on. And that's not a small gig, mind you. Their listenership is 20 to 30,000. New York City is a very densely populated area. They have an antenna on the top of the Empire State Building. And they have me on, and it's at noon. It's a lunchtime show that I go on, and people don't just listen in New York City; they listen in Long Island and New Jersey, and You know, the noon show on WBAI has me on very frequently. Rebecca Miles is a friend, a journalist, and a longtime radio broadcaster, producer, works with Chris Hedges. And, you know, she's somebody that I really respect. And, you know, she has this noon show and she frequently has me on. So I went on the show, and the topic was what I had talked about here on this channel on Saturday night, which was Trump's anti-communism. But we also talked about right now, Trump is at the NATO summit in Ankara, and the issue there is Russia. I don't think much is going to happen regarding Iran at the NATO summit. There'll be some talk, but it's not going to do anything because the NATO countries are largely not involved with the U.S. attack on Iran. But with Russia and the fight with Russia, they are. And Ukraine, you know, has been blowing up school buses and buses full of children in the lead up to the meeting because they're trying to market themselves to Europe. But anyway, I get into all of that in the interview. This was my WBAI interview this afternoon that I did, you know, and it was heard by 20 to 30,000 New Yorkers. So this was me on WBAI radio. We'll play that, and then we'll do the roll call. Then I'll answer people's questions. So not too late to send a question if you got one. We'll answer any questions on Buy Me a Coffee, Rumble Rants, etc. So all right, here's my WBAI interview.
Now is Caleb Maupin, journalist, author, and founder of the Center for Political Innovation, to talk about the 250th anniversaries we've all just been through, Trump's speeches, and Trump's visit to Turkey for the NATO summit. He's leaving today. Welcome to the show, Caleb.
Sure. Glad to be here as always.
So we saw President Donald Trump marking the United States' 250th anniversary of independence with a nationalized televised celebration in Washington, D.C., blending patriotic tributes with partisan political messaging while honoring veterans, historic American symbols, and the nation's founding. Trump also promoted his Save America Act election proposal, emphasized his support for the Second Amendment, and renewed criticism of communism, departing from more traditional unifying tones of Independence Day. What was your take on it all?
Well, it's quite interesting. I mean, Donald Trump is sinking in the polls right now, wildly unpopular because of this war with Iran, and people are looking ahead to August when the U.S. oil reserves run out and what the situation could be. Donald Trump's decision to attack Iran has rendered him wildly unpopular. He said he was going to fix Biden's inflation, and now inflation is far worse than it was. And I think you can interpret these remarks that Donald Trump made in two ways. The first factor is there's an element of nostalgia. You have to remember a lot of the folks who voted for Trump are older folks. And if you can remember a generation ago when America's economy was much, much better than it is today, and the Soviet Union was falling, and the Eastern Bloc countries were falling, and Ronald Reagan was, getting us out of the 1960s and the 70s confusion and saying, oh, we're proud to be Americans again. And America was gaining a lot of influence around the world as the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc was falling, and communism was losing and America was winning. And those are the good old days. And Donald Trump is up there trying to say, look, I'm trying to bring back the good old days. I'm trying to make it a world that you felt much more confident and happy about when you were younger, when the economy was stronger, when America's standing in the world seemed a lot stronger, and when people in America itself seemed a lot more enthusiastic about the country, about the military, et cetera. So part of it is nostalgia and kind of longing for a time when U.S. institutions were much more respected and the U.S. Society in general had higher morale and was more solidly together. That's part of it. The other thing, though, is you have to remember, and this is something that a lot of people in Trump's camp should really think about. When you talk about the deep state in America, which is a common talking point among Trump supporters, many of whom are no longer his supporters, many of whom have gone to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson route of disagreeing with him. But even still, among Trump supporters, you'll hear talk of the deep state. What is the deep state? Well, that's the intelligence apparatus. And the two major intelligence agencies of the United States, the FBI and the CIA, are founded on anti-communism. The FBI was started in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution when in Washington, D.C., a congressional librarian named J. Edgar Hoover started giving lectures on the evils of communism, and eventually Mitchell Palmer, the Department of Justice, the DOJ head, the Attorney General, gave him a wing of the Department of Justice. First, it was called the BOI, the Bureau of Investigation, and then it became known as the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And when FBI agents are trained, they're taught this history, that the FBI is this very, very special wing of the Department of Justice that saved America from communism, that rescued America from the nightmare of communism. That's what they're taught in their training. And the CIA was founded after the Second World War, the Central Intelligence Agency. After World War II, when the Cold War got going, they built Langley, and they moved from simply having military intelligence to having the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. And it was founded, the Dulles brothers were key in setting it up, and it was about fighting communism. So when Donald Trump is up there pounding the podium about communism bad, he's appealing to the deep state, because that is the founding principle of the two major entities of American intelligence. And he's saying, look, I'm for what you guys are supposed to be for. I'm for opposing the commies. Now, we know that the CIA has a history of kind of funding liberal anti-communism and engaging in kind of eccentric activities to oppose communism, things that might put them on the left of the American political spectrum. The FBI is generally Republican, but they haven't been too friendly to Trump over the past few years. But generally, I mean, Trump is up there. He's repeating the founding principles upon which the U.S. deep state was founded. Communism bad, America good. You cannot be a communist and be a patriot. You can be loyal to Karl Marx or you're loyal to America. You can't be both. He's saying what, these agencies believe in their founding principles and what all their agents are taught in their training.
Right, but another way to read it, of course, is that he's referring to the Democratic Socialists of America who are winning in innumerable races, right? He's trying to twin those two together.
Well, of course. And he's making the point that that's who my opponents are. I stand for the principles upon which the American deep state is founded, and it appears that we have opposition. We have people who don't believe in such things, like, Mayor Mamdani, like the recent DSA sweep in the primaries in New York, who don't believe in such things, so support me. And he's positioning himself that way. The other thing to remember is that, the DSA sweep and, people like the recent victorious primary members, Brad Lander and others, that they're kind of playing a dual role. You remember when Trump was first taking office, the media made a really, really big deal out of Richard Spencer and the alt-right. And the narrative was kind of Trump is such a bad guy that this kind of extremist group, these white supremacists, are gaining ground, and that's why Trump is so bad. And that's why, we need to get Trump out of here, because he's making America so extreme and partisan that these fanatics are gaining ground. And that was the narrative in the lead up to Trump's victory when Hillary Clinton was talking about the alt-right. And that was also the narrative around the Charlottesville events of 2017. And that there's something similar to that going on. The narrative is kind of that Trump is such a bad leader, and Trump has made the country so partisan and so divided that these crazy extremists have won the primary, that the Democratic Party is being infiltrated by fanatical communists. And, look at this woman who just got nominated. She's got a Twitter account that she used to have where she praised China and she praised Stalin and she praised Kim Il-sung. So this is why Trump has got to go. Well, Trump is trying to turn that on its head and say, these are my opponents, right, are these extremists, and you have to be with me because I'm for what America and the American establishment, especially the American intelligence establishment, is supposed to be for, which is protecting the country from communism. But then that just raises the question, what is communism? I mean, Cold War, Soviet Marxist-Leninist ideology isn't around anymore. I mean, it's not, right? You've got China with socialism with Chinese characteristics. You've got the axis of resistance in the Middle East led by Iran and their allies. You've got Bolivarianism in Latin America. You've got various anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist ideologies, but Soviet Marxism, Leninism is just not a factor anymore. And even the DSA, I mean, that's not what they believe in. They believe in democratic socialism, and their principles are basically that they would like to expand the welfare state. They would like more of a welfare state. I mean, they're kind of akin to the British Labour Party. Or kind of the social democratic parties that we've seen throughout Europe that get elected, that hold key positions, that pass, kind of reforms that make life easier for working people and stabilize the economy. But presenting them as if they are Soviet communism, presenting Trump as the nostalgic figure who's fighting against Soviet communism. This fits a narrative that wins with the older folks and kind of matches what the intelligence agencies are supposed to believe in.
Can we go now to Trump heading off to Turkey for the NATO summit? You've got the president of Turkey saying that no solution that doesn't take strength from will and contribution of regional countries can be lasting. I'm wondering what role should regional powers such as Turkey, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states play in securing a sort of US-Iran agreement?
Well, that is a big question because I think that this NATO summit is going to be more about Russia than about Iran. The NATO countries largely did not approve of Trump attacking Iran. He did it without their approval. He did it in a way that hurt them, and it's hurting the world economy. And I think that Iran and, the Memorandum of Understanding is going to be carried out without the NATO countries' involvement. I think NATO is probably not going to have much of a seat at the table. Now, Turkey, as a member of NATO, as a Muslim country, right, that's a little bit different. Now, they may be able to play some role to some degree because they are a Muslim country, because they are against Israel, because they are tied to the Muslim Brotherhood, and they have, kind of a foot into the Muslim world. That may be the case, but largely, I think it's going to be the United States and Iran that work out kind of a separate piece. I don't see NATO countries playing a major role. At the same time, though, Russia is going to be on the agenda. Russia is going to be a big part of the agenda. And Zelensky unloaded an attack, in the lead up to the summit. And if you listen to what the Russian Foreign Ministry is pointing out, Ukraine is losing on the battlefield and has lost a huge amount of ground. So at this point, they are targeting civilians. And they seem to, there's a pattern of them attacking, civilian buses with drones, right? You have civilians that are on a bus in Russia, and it gets attacked by drones that are sent by Ukraine. And this is a pattern, and this is, it appears, and the analysis given by the Russian Foreign Ministry, is that Zelensky is demonstrating that while Ukraine may lose on the battlefield, they are useful in fighting Russia, that they are helpful in attacking Russia, that they're willing to attack civilians in Russia, they're willing to continue attacks in Russia. So don't abandon them. And don't, sign a deal with Russia to end the war, because they will continue attacking Russia, and that's valuable to the European powers, right? That's valuable. That Ukraine is kind of marketing itself in the lead up to the NATO summit, saying that we have value in the sense that we can continue terrorizing civilians in Russia, blowing up buses, killing children, attacking, soccer teams of high school age students. I believe, the recent drone attack on a bus today, there was a 1-year-old child that had multiple shrapnel wounds. It's just horrendous what they're doing, blatantly targeting civilians as a way to kind of market themselves and say they still have value as they're losing the war. Now, Donald Trump said that not only do they have an agreement with Russia to end the war, which there was confusion about. I guess, Russia made clear that there was a peace deal they would agree to that was presented in Anchorage a year ago, August 15th, and then Marco Rubio said, well, there is no peace deal. Now Trump has come out and said there is a peace deal that Russia agrees to, and he says for the first time Ukraine has hinted that they are agreeing to this peace deal as well. So there's a chance Donald Trump is raising the hopes that this summit in Turkey will result in an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. And that's what Donald Trump is preparing to go there and at least raise the hopes that there could be an agreement made where the Ukraine war ends. And it appears Zelensky is very afraid that may happen, that the European powers may be convinced of this. And that's going to be the main issue at the NATO summit. I don't expect Iran will be much on the table other than condemnation of the U.S. attack. The NATO countries don't agree with the United States having done what they did. Even Britain is not fully on board and has been somewhat critical. Britain maintains diplomatic relations with Iran. So largely the United States is pretty isolated when it comes to Iran stuff. But it's Russia that's going to be the main point of discussion, I think.
Right, and of course, I guess it makes sense when the MOU is not, it doesn't seem to be in effect. If the first point is to stop the bombing in Lebanon, this has not happened. So it's not a win. The deal is not really in place. So I guess Trump has to save face and perhaps now switch gears to bringing about peace, in quotes, in between Ukraine and Russia.
I mean, perhaps. I mean, Iran has not officially declared the MOU to be completely off. Right now, Iran, they just had the ceremony, the burial of Supreme Leader Khamenei, who was killed. Hundreds of thousands of Iranians in the streets. And a lot of world leaders sending messages of sympathy and support. They're buried Supreme Leader Khamenei. But as far as Iran is concerned, they haven't completely abandoned the MOU. Like the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, makes clear that, like you said, there is supposed to be an end to the fighting in Lebanon, and there clearly is not. However, Iran has not announced that it's over. They said that according to the MOU, they have the right to control the Strait of Hormuz for the next 2 months, at least. And so they've blocked it. They're still controlling it. They are letting some ships go through, but they're still controlling it. And so it's not clear. Neither the USA nor Iran has officially said that, oh, the MOU is out, we're just at war again. They haven't done that yet. And if that were happening, if that were the case, we'd be seeing more bombing, and we'd be seeing, more destruction. The biggest untold story, though, is that all the military bases of the United States in the Middle East have been destroyed. And that's not getting any play in American media. They did evacuate them ahead of time, so a lot of the soldiers were not killed. The death number of U.S. military personnel was low. But U.S. military bases throughout the region have just been pummeled and destroyed. And U.S. media is covering that up and not acknowledging that. But the Iranian retaliation against U.S. bases throughout the region was massive.
Right. Caleb, thank you very much for joining us on Frontline Voices. Caleb Maupin, journalist, author, and founder of the Center for Political Innovation. Thank you for your comments today.
Sure thing.
Yeah, that was my radio interview on WBAI. We covered a lot of territory. And again, 20, 30,000 people heard me live on the radio. So yeah, what I do is important. And what we do at CPI is very important. I can't wait to show you the video from LA. I know they did great work in LA over the weekend with July 4th. I saw some of the photos of the table that they had. And I know Penny's doing great stuff in Minneapolis, and Chicago's getting ready for our convention. And yeah, we as an organization, as a community of people, we are marching forward, and we are building a community of anti-imperialists. Dare to struggle, dare to win. So why don't we do our roll call? We'll find out who's watching, and then I will answer people's questions. So if you got any questions, go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. That's the best way to send any questions that you've got. Or you can do a super chat because we're monetized, or you can do a Rumble rant or whatever. But names and locations. We got Jake in Portland. Good to see you. Fahib Buku in Montreal. Good to see you. Names and locations. Brentwood, Deep Green VO. Paul, good to see you, brother. Names and locations. Brian in Dayton, Liverpool, UK, Auckland, New Zealand, Penny in Minnesota. Good to see you. Ryan in Kansas City, Jenny in Cincinnati. Good to see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. India, Amway in India. Good to see you, Amway. Good to see you. Michael in Bayonne is with us. Michael's a good friend of ours. Michael's very awesome. Good to see you, Michael. Hope everything's going well for you. Samuel in the Far East. You're always watching, Samuel, and I hope that you love what we do here. My heart goes out to you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Anybody else? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. All right. Well, we're going to start answering people's questions. Oh, Dan, innovationist in the LA area. Join us in Chicago in August. Yes. The announcement of our Chicago convention will be posted shortly. We've announced the 7-day program. We've announced the France out of Africa. but we got to get the announcement for the convention up. That's one thing that'll be out shortly. It's going to be a great convention. We're going to fill up that auditorium. It's going to be great. I'm excited. So, all righty. So we've got a few questions that have come in via Buy Me a Coffee. Felix said, any pointers, like books and authors, that deconstruct the narrative of Western democracy? Oh, we got Randy from Trinidad. Good to see you, Randy. Well, there's a textbook of political science that was written by the late Michael Parenti called Democracy for the Few. And it was like a college textbook on the issue of politics and democracy. And it's very all encompassing. And it's kind of one of his most important works, Democracy for the Few, which is Michael Parenti's textbook. It's on that very question. But in addition to that, I would recommend, when you're talking about democracy, I would recommend Dominic Lusardo and his critiques of liberalism, Western liberalism. That's important, right? Dominic Lusardo, the Italian anti-imperialist. I would also recommend Alexander Dugin, because Alexander Dugin, as a Russian and as a Eurasianist, he has a little bit of a different take on these points, coming at it from a geopolitical perspective. But, a lot of classical Marxist literature isn't as good on these points, right? The standard Marxist answer that you get about democracy is, well, the people with the money rule, and so it's not real democracy. Right, but that doesn't fully answer the question. Lenin wrote a very important book called Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky, which is a pill that's a little bit tough for people to swallow, where, Kautsky was this German social democrat who said the Bolsheviks should have just gotten elected. They should have waited for the Constituent Assembly. They shouldn't have established the Soviet Union. And in Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky by Lenin, he basically says, look, what we're doing here, we're not trying to fulfill Western democracy. Western democracy has never been such a thing. And what we're doing is we're not engaged in a struggle to make Western democracy live up to its ideals. We're engaged in a class struggle. And that real democracy is only going to be possible when, you build a society without classes and when you create abundance. And until then, there's going to be some people making decisions and not others. And every country in the world has provisions in its constitution for declaring martial law or establishing a state of emergency. And Proletarian Revolution and the Renegade Kautsky by Vladimir Lenin is a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow because, a lot of standard leftist critique of democracy is just, if one group of people has more money than everybody else, it's not really democratic. Okay, true. So then from there, they say, so we just want to adjust things so we can be truly democratic. And actually, that's not really a scientific understanding of the state, right? The state is an institution that serves different classes and serves different ends. And there is no real democracy until you have a society without classes. And that, the Soviet Union wasn't as quote unquote democratic as America is in the sense of free speech, right? In the sense of, of civil liberties. But it was more democratic in the sense that people were more heavily involved in governing. And that what does democracy really mean and why did it arise? These are big questions. And the way that they're framed, I think, Noah in the video was talking about Joe Biden, he has this thing, America is an idea. The way it's framed in the West is so naive and limited and moralistic why is it that ancient Greek city-states started having democracy? Why is it that in ancient Greece, they had elected governments? In Athens, for example, the Republic. Why? They were just good, Caleb. Well, they believed people should have the right to have an elected government, consent to the governed. No, it was because these were city-states that maintained their power by controlling huge swaths of territory with a mighty army. And they went around and they controlled all this territory and they made all the areas that they conquered, give them slaves. 90% of the people living in Athens, the city-state, were slaves, had no rights, made them give them food because the people in the city-state, they didn't have big farms, right? It was the people in the countryside who were doing the farming, made them give them, minerals and, metal and having a mighty city-state with a mighty army that, plunders and keeps control over vast territories of areas. You need everybody to get in on the action, right? And you need everyone to get involved. It's like a gang. All right. You think about it, right? You know, somebody has a gang. We're just going to go rob an area, and we're going to go rob an area and make sure that, you know, that everyone gives us their stuff, basically, right? That's what the ancient Greek city states were. They were gangs, right? We're a group of people. We live in a certain area, and we're going to get a group of people together that we make all the people in this area give us stuff. Well, everyone in the gang is taking on an element of risk, right? Because they're, you know, people might fight back. And so they're going to say, hey, after we go out and rob all the people in this area, we need to make sure that I get a share of this stuff. Democracy was about making sure every gang member got a share of the proceeds. It was about having, you know, some kind of agreement, some kind of institution among the plunderers and the thieves, that it wouldn't all go to one guy. That you know, that all the gang members would get some say in how the loot was divvied up. And that's the ancient Roman Republic, the ancient Greek, you know, city states that had democracies. It wasn't for the overwhelming majority of the population. The overwhelming majority of the population were slaves. And these were military societies. And it was just, the military was a gang that controlled a certain area, right? And they had a mighty military, and they controlled a certain area. And they wanted to motivate every free adult male in the city state to have, you know, skin in the game. And that's really what it was about. And in fact, if you look at, you know, the founding of this country, originally, in order to vote, you didn't just have to be white. You didn't just have to be male. You had to be a property owner. And there was a feeling that if you're not a property owner, you shouldn't get a vote, because your property value is not, you don't have any property that's going to, you know, that's going to go up or down based on the decisions of the government. And that the reason the government exists is to manage the state, which is managing and protecting private property. So if you don't own any property in terms of land, you didn't get to vote. And in Britain, at the time that they were debating that was a big debate. And there were many people, including Oliver Cromwell and others, that said you should only have a vote if you are, quote, invested in the nation, if you own property. And, you know, suffrage only existed for land-owning white males. And that's how it was in the ancient Greek city-states. The land-owning males, the property-owning males that were, you know, a small percentage of the country, they were the only ones that voted, because it was understood that the state existed to enrich them and help them get richer. And they should all have a say in it, because they also were the ones that would have to go out and fight. You know, and so, I mean, you look at that, if you understand that's what democracy was really about. Democracy was an agreement among thieves, basically. It was an agreement among gangs, you know, about, you know, making sure that the loot got fairly divided. Right. And that they had all kinds of institutions set up. I mean, if you can understand that, and you can understand things like posse comitatus, and how the Roman army had to disband before it came into the city because they were having all these coups, and democracy was always being overthrown by this general or that general. You read about the Gracchi brothers, and you read about the rise of Julius Caesar. Michael Parenti wrote his book about. You understand that democracy was a mechanism for property owners settling the score among themselves and making sure they all got a share of the loot. That really kind of takes apart the idea, this noble idea of the rights of man. And that you know, the West, as it came to exist, right, there's a lot of fairy tale language associated with the West. We want to believe that everything we have in the West was created for the best of noblest reasons. And yes, there are many noble people in Western history, and there are some not as noble people. And that we look at things that come out of the East as if they are purely evil and primitive and diabolical. And we look at the history of the West like it's so enlightened, and the world is much more nuanced than that. So I think that's important. And that when you talk about democracy means the rule of the people. Well, which people? I mean, in American history, that generally didn't mean black people, meant only white people. It meant only men, you know, for a long time, meant only property owners at the beginning. And also, what does the rule of the people mean? Well, you know, if the rule of the people means participation, means the people are the ones carrying out the orders, the people are the ones involved in the process of governing. Many countries we consider to be more totalitarian or authoritarian are more democratic at the same time, because the people are the ones heavily involved. You know, and I mean, they even talk about, you know, you can even go back. You could argue that, you know, in the Renaissance era, the age of Queen Elizabeth, they didn't have cops who patrolled the streets back then. You know, they did have laws and they did hang people pretty often. They had the death penalty used pretty often, and they had lots of harsh penalties. But in terms of street cops patrolling the streets, they didn't have those because people just governed themselves, right? And it was quite rare that the state got involved. When the state did get involved, it was very harsh, and there were very, very harsh penalties. And they tortured people and executed people and all of that. But in everyday life, you know, you did not have cops on the street enforcing things because people just kind of bullied each other and fought each other and settled the scores among themselves. And you know, you even think about you know, a lot of boomers talk about how, you know, it used to be common for there to be fistfights in the workplace. There used to be common for there to be fistfights in school. A lot of, you know, a lot of things are different, right? And that, you know, the amount of policing that goes on in our modern time is very massive. But if people are not being policed, if they're just kind of ruling themselves, is that more democracy or is that less democracy because they're not involved in the government and the government is the one doing it? You know, what does rule of the people really mean? I mean, it's a big question. What does it really mean? And we just assume it means, well, the closer you are to the American system, the more democratic you are. Who said? Who said? You know, I mean, in America, we have a group of exceptionally wealthy people with billions and billions and billions of dollars who have astronomical influence over government and policy compared to average people. Average people, they may be able to have some influence in like local government. And they do have one vote, but largely, so what does this mean, right? And this assumption, well, democracy, the closer to the American system or the Western system, the more democratic it is, and the further away from it, the less democratic it is. Is that what democracy means? Like, does democracy mean the involvement of the people? Does democracy mean the people are free to say whatever they want while a group of rich people run the government? Does democracy mean, you know, equal access? What does democracy or democratic participation or you know, consent of the governed even mean? Right? These are big questions that a lot of people, we just kind of assume, well, America is the ideal, the homeland of democracy. Not that simple, right? Not that simple. Okay. Yeah. Anyhow, so next question. Paul said, any good sources as a good starting point on economic philosophy from different viewpoints and beliefs? Right. So economics is really important. And when it comes to economics, there's, you know, the books I generally recommend, I generally recommend, you know, if you want the CPI, kind of the viewpoint that we have of overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profit, right? We have these 4 books, and I've recommended them before, but I'll also talk about some other ones. So this is a very good book, Dialectical Economics by Lynn Marcus, and it really gets into the degrowth, growth debate, etc. I also recommend, this is a very, very, it's lectures by Nelson Peary, who was a Marxist activist in the 1960s and 70s. He wrote this in the 90s. It's called The Future is Up to Us, a Revolutionary Talking Politics with the American People. I recommend High Tech, Low Pay by Sam Marcy, which is about automation and its effect on the economy. I also recommend Low Wage Capitalism, Colossus with a Feet of Clay by Fred Goldstein. I also recommend R. Palm Dutt and this book, Fascism and Social Revolution, because it gets into the problem of overproduction and degrowth and the essence of fascism being degrowth. In terms of economics, this is a very good introductory text. It's called Economics, the User's Guide. And it's by the South Korean economist Ha-John Chang. And it's very simple, and it's very anti-degrowth, and it's very critical of neoliberalism and laissez-faire capitalism. And I really appreciated this book. It gives some it's anti-neoliberal, but it's also anti-degrowth. A lot of stuff that comes out that seems socialistic is promoting degrowth at this point. And a lot of stuff that is anti-degrowth tends to be neoliberal and free market and libertarian. This is neither, right? This economist, anything by this guy, Ha-Jun Chang, if you can get your hands on any of his economics books, he's a brilliant economist from South Korea. He's a Marxist, and he's pro-growth, and he's anti-Malthusian, and he sounds like a LaRouche person. He sounds LaRoucheist in a lot of his perspective. I would really recommend his stuff. So yeah, if you're looking for stuff that is about economics, those are the titles that I generally recommend. So I think, when it really gets down to it, I'm against neoliberalism. I think I have a book here that's a history of austerity, right? And again, a lot of this stuff, a lot of like leftist, this is like a leftist economics book, right? This is Mark Blythe, Austerity, the History of a Dangerous Idea, and it's similar to, I have a book here by Philip Thayer, Europe Since 1989, which is similar to that. And then there's the stuff by, there's various like leftist economists. The problem with a lot of them is that they are, a lot of them promote degrowth. A lot of them are they're tied in with kind of the liberal activist, be a Democrat stuff, so that you got to be careful with them. They have good critiques of neoliberalism, though. They will point out that neoliberalism doesn't have good effects, but at the same time, they won't really, like Naomi Klein, her book, The Shock Doctrine, is a very good critique of neoliberalism, but it's also anti-China, but it also is promoting degrowth, right? You have Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins. Again, very good book about the IMF and the World Bank, how they control people, but also very Malthusian, degrowth oriented, anti-China. There's a layer of these kind of like academic critics of free market capitalism that they feel like they have to jump on the leftist bandwagon. And because of that, their work is limited. So, those are the books I would recommend as introductions to economics. The LaRouchian perspective I draw heavily from, but it is not my perspective. There are some big differences, but Lyndon LaRouche wrote a book called You Want to Learn About Economics. I've got that on the shelf, over there. That's, it's pretty basic. It's pretty good. It's just kind of an introductory textbook. He's got another book called The Ugly Truth About Milton Friedman, which is a very good critique of neoliberalism that he wrote decades before anybody else was talking about neoliberalism, right? It became trendy to talk about neoliberalism in like the 2000s. But Lyndon LaRouche was talking about it in the 1970s when it was first happening in Chile and other places. So yeah. And I mean, in terms of, Michael Parenti's stuff tends to focus on politics, not economics. A lot of people really get a lot out of Michael Hudson. I've never really gotten into Michael Hudson. I don't have a critique of his work. I just haven't studied it as much. So yeah, I'm trying to think other books about economics, but yeah. So yeah, we're talking about economics specifically. Those are generally the texts I would recommend. So there we go. All right. And then someone anonymously, that's one of the interesting things about this, is that people can send anonymous questions. Now, lately there have been a lot of questions that are anonymous, and they all seem to be from the same person, because there's a certain line of reasoning behind all of them. They sent a 3-part question. The first 2 parts of the question I'm not going to answer because they seem like bait. The person is trying to get me to say something anti-Semitic, and I'm not going to do that. Question number 1 in his buy me a coffee is, something about something. It's bait. No, question number 2, right? It's also bait, right? But then question 3 is a fair question. But again, this follows this person. I think these questions are coming from the same person, because he's always trying to find hypocrisy in the anti-imperialist countries, right? So it's like, the first 2 just seemed like bait to try and get me to say something that would be interpreted as anti-Semitism. And then the third one was, he said, and he asks legitimate questions that are easily explainable and answerable, but he's always trying to go, it's like he's asking me questions to go, aha, see, Russia and Iran are not really anti-imperialist or whatever. He points to contradictions in the anti-imperialist camp. So the third question he sent was, Syria and Libya both supported Iran against Iraq, but I heard Iran supported the protests against Gaddafi early on. Is it true they thought the Arab Spring was a continuation of the Islamic Revolution? And what was the Arab Spring in reality, and why did it cause the refugee crisis? Okay, those are fair questions. Again, I feel like you're trying to lead me towards certain conclusions with your questions, or you're trying to maybe just get it on these streams that, Iran didn't agree with you, Caleb, or something like that. That's fine. I will answer that, because I lived through all of this. I was part of Occupy Wall Street. I was politically active during the Arab Spring. Iran, Gaddafi supported Iran against Iraq. That's true, because Gaddafi's a Muslim, and Iran was considered anti-imperialist, and Iraq was backed by the United States during the first half of the Iraq-Iran war. And Gaddafi was a Muslim. Now, Gaddafi also, he took the opposite position on Afghanistan, though. You'll remember. Gaddafi took the position, he opposed the Soviet Union in Afghanistan because he was trying to gain influence in the Muslim world, and because the Carter administration, Billy Carter, Jimmy Carter's younger brother, was sent to Libya and kind of befriended Gaddafi. And so because of that, Libya, there was like distance, right? That was the Brzezinski strategy of kind of distance between the Soviet Union, what they called satellite countries. And they considered Libya to be a satellite country of US, of the Soviet Union. And so, the Carter strategy was we're going to try and court the satellite countries and pull them further away, from the Soviet Union. Libya was largely Soviet aligned, but under the Carter administration, the feeling was, let's be nicer to Libya and maybe try to get them closer to us. And it worked to some degree or other. And that's part of the Afghanistan policy of Libya. And during those years, Gaddafi was doing a lot to try and win Muslims to support him. For example, there's a movie that is frequently shown on Middle Eastern television, which I've never seen, but is apparently in the Middle East, it's one of the most watched films. It's about the life of the Prophet Muhammad. It's called The Message. And it was paid for by Gaddafi. Gaddafi used oil money to make this film about the life of the Prophet Muhammad. And the film is very much an answer to Marxism, even though, the Prophet Muhammad was not alive at the time that, Marxism. The film was made in like 1978, 79, around that time. Communism was very popular in the Middle East. And the film was saying, well, the things that might attract one to communism, you can be a Muslim and do that too. And there's an emphasis on like the rights of women. There's an emphasis on like the oppressed and treating poor people fairly. And if you watch The Message, even though it's an Islamic film about the life of the Prophet Muhammad, and it's still to this day, it is shown like every day on Middle Eastern television. Like every child in Saudi Arabia has seen the film. It's like, it is one of the most popular Muslim movies. Gaddafi paid for it and was using it to try and like, get people in the Middle East who are more anti-communist to see him as a Muslim and not see him as their enemy. Now, as far as the Arab Spring, so we'll talk about the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring, I am convinced, was what you might call a controlled demolition. Imagine that, you're in a neighborhood and there's this old building that is full of, hazardous, flammable material. And any day now, it's going to catch on fire. So you and the other people in the neighborhood and the city council, you say, all right, this building is a fire hazard. So rather than just wait for it to catch on fire on its own, which is a threat to public health, we're going to have a controlled demolition. We're going to light it on fire ourselves and watch it burn and use the fire to destroy the building and try to rebuild it as we want. That's what the Arab Spring was. That basically the global economy had crashed in 2008. And then the Middle East had a very big drought. And, it was only a matter of time before there were huge uprisings all over the Middle East. So the Hillary Clinton State Department, first of all, I think having Barack Hussein Obama as president was a key part of it because he was a Muslim, and the Arab world was going to trust him more. Right. Even though he wasn't really a Muslim, but there was this hint that Obama, he went to a Muslim school. His middle name is Hussein. He wasn't really a Muslim, but that was, Obama. There was this hint that he was a Muslim. And, in the Houthi book, I have a whole section on the Arab Spring and like Barack Obama as a modern day Napoleon. Napoleon pretended to be a Muslim to gain the trust of the Arab world. And I feel like Obama was a Napoleon, right? A 21st century Napoleon for America. From America, right? That he, to gain the trust of the Muslim world, we had a black man named Barack Hussein Obama as the president. And rather than just let the revolts happen on their own, the idea was, well, we'll have them happen on our terms. Now, I have certain reasons for thinking that. One reason for thinking of that is because in 2008, I will never forget the summer that Barack Obama was running for president. I was I will never forget. I was in Detroit. I spent the summer in Detroit. I spent the summer in Detroit, and I always forget his name. I always forget his name, and I know his name, and he was a member of the House of Representatives in Detroit. I cannot remember his name. What is his name? John Conyers. John Conyers. So I was in Detroit. I was working as an intern for this leftist group that was trying to stop home foreclosures. And every week there was a meeting of this group called the Michigan Emergency Committee Against War and Injustice, McCowie. It's like the anti-war group. So I showed up at this leftist office for the McCowie meeting, which happened once a week. And there'd be 10, 20 people would come to this meeting. And John Conyers from the U.S. House of Representatives showed up at the meeting like a surprise guest. There was a member of Congress. And John Conyers urged us all to vote for Barack Obama and to campaign for Barack Obama. And I will never forget what he said. He said that it's not just in America that they're having an economic crisis. He said it's all over the world and in the Middle East. And in some of these Middle Eastern countries, America is supporting dictators, he said, and that this economic crisis is there, and we need a president who can relate to all the young men who are unemployed in these Middle Eastern nations, who are going to go out and protest and overthrow these dictators, right? And a lot of times America is supporting these dictators, and so a lot of these young men that are unemployed in the Middle East, they're going to be angry at America because America is supporting the dictator. So it's really important that we have Barack Obama, who's somebody who can talk to those young men in the Middle Eastern countries who have lost their jobs and can relate to them. I sat there, and at the time I thought, what in the world is he talking about? Like, it's like, so there's an economic crisis, which there had been, the Wall Street had crashed. There was an economic crisis, and there's an economic crisis in the Middle East, and there's a lot of unmarried young men, in Middle Eastern countries. And a lot of times America is supporting dictators in the Middle East, all true. And so we need a president who can relate to those young men who are going to be protesting the dictators or whatever. Now, he said that, and I had no idea what he's talking about. Now I know what he was talking about, which was the Arab Spring, right? John Conyers. And he basically said, the Arab Spring is going to come, and we need to make sure that Obama can, pivot the Arab Spring in the direction of supporting the United States. The Arab Spring was going to happen. It wasn't just the United States that knew that. Iran knew it, that the Arab Spring was going to happen. So the idea was to have it happen on American terms. Al Jazeera, Twitter and Facebook were very new, and they were, they were making things go viral, et cetera. And then on top of that, there was Al Jazeera, which is the TV network based in Qatar that's funded by, the Qatari monarchy and Turkey, that's Muslim Brotherhood aligned. The Muslim Brotherhood, which is CIA, US aligned, Muslims, westernized Muslims, and social media, which was big and new and exciting. Social media and Twitter and Facebook and Al Jazeera, they kind of preempted the Arab Spring, which is, it started out in Tunisia. A guy lit himself on fire and it went viral. The video of him lighting himself on fire went viral, and it turned into a big thing, and they started having protests. And Ben Ali, longtime US aligned, US backed dictator of Tunisia, was toppled. And in Egypt, eventually, the government of Hosni Mubarak was toppled. And, in the Middle East and in the Arab, North Africa and the Arab speaking world and the Arab world, you had uprisings going on. And it was an attempt to have the revolution and not have it get out of control. And if George W. Bush had been president during the Arab Spring, we'd have about 5 different Irans right now. They wanted to make sure that didn't happen. That said, Iran wanted to try and get a foothold within it, right? It was strategic, right? Iran is an Islamic country. And the other thing about the Arab Spring that didn't get reported on American TV was that in all the countries where the Arab Spring happened, including Libya, including Syria, but especially in Egypt and places like that, but everywhere, right? the big factor was that there was a drought all over the Middle East. So all the people who lived in the countryside went to the cities. The people in the countryside in the Middle East are way more religious. All right, that's just a fact. It's like that in America too. People in rural areas are more Christian, more religious than people in cities are. That's just kind of a reality. It's like that in the Middle East too. In Egypt, in the rural areas, they tended to be Muslim Brotherhood supporters, whereas the military and the more secular aspects of Egyptian society had more support in the cities. So what happened in the lead up to the Arab Spring was in the rural areas, there was droughts and people lost their farms and people didn't have anything. So the young men from the rural areas all moved into the cities. They were more religious. And a lot of the anger, a lot of the protests of the Arab Spring was accusing the leaders of not being truly Muslim. Okay. Now that doesn't translate in American TV in Egypt. Oh no, they were just fighting for freedom. They were just fighting against corruption. That's actually not true. Okay. A lot of the protesting was Hosni Mubarak is corrupt and he has a whole bunch of concubines and he's not a good Muslim. There was like a moralist Islamist populism, right? That the Muslim Brotherhood really pushed, which was that, that our leaders in the Arab world are not following the Quran. They're not good people. And that was one of the main things against Gaddafi. Social media in Libya was flooded with claims that Gaddafi had a Russian girlfriend who was not a Muslim, that Gaddafi had a mistress who was a non-Muslim, which was considered, it was bad enough that he was sleeping with a woman who was not his wife, but he had a Russian girlfriend. And I don't even know if it was true. It might have been true. I don't know. I don't care about Gaddafi's sex life. Not interested. That was a big part of the protests in Libya was Gaddafi has a girlfriend who is a non-Muslim. And, and that the Arab Spring, it was against the corruption and anger at the economics, but it was also very, very Islamist. And it was like our leaders are corrupt. And in Syria, ultimately, it turned into, a struggle to eventually create. And now in Syria, they have an Islamist government. They have a Sunni Islamist government, right? And that in a lot of these countries, they had a secular government that had come out of the era of Arab nationalism. The Egyptian government comes out of the era of Arab nationalism. It wasn't really an Arab nationalist under Mubarak, but the military, whatever. And it was the Muslim Brotherhood and all of them went out and they were demanding a more Islamist government. So Iran is an Islamic republic. Now they're Shia, they're not Sunni. So it's a little bit nuanced, but Iran believes in an Islamic government. They just want a Shia Islamic government, right? And that Iran basically saw this happening and they said, okay, we need to try and gain a foothold within this. Okay. That's really what was going on. And so Iran called the Arab Spring the Islamic Awakening. And Supreme Leader Khamenei and others said, well, actually, the Arab Spring is the people of the Middle East seeing the corruption and all of that. And what they really need is to establish Islamic republics. And there is an attempt to mobilize Shia around the world to be part of the Arab Spring and to push the Arab Spring in an anti-imperialist and pro-Islamist direction. Didn't work. Pro-Iranian direction. Didn't work. Now, in Libya, right, there is a huge amount of bad blood between Gaddafi and Shia Muslims, okay? Gaddafi did support Iran against Iraq, but Gaddafi is a secular leader. He's a Sunni Muslim. He was a Sunni Muslim, but he created a secular state. Iran is a Shia Islamic republic. And Gaddafi executed a very prominent Lebanese Shia Muslim cleric. No one really knows what happened. Okay. And you can read about it. It's a very strange incident. Let me pull it up. I'll show you about it. Shia cleric killed by Gaddafi, but we don't really know if he was killed by Gaddafi, right? Imam Musa al-Sadr in 1978, a year before the Islamic Revolution of Iran, Musa al-Sadr, who was the top Shia Muslim cleric in Lebanon, got on Gaddafi's plane. And when Gaddafi's plane landed, he wasn't on it anymore. Okay. Not clear what happened. Now, it's largely understood that Gaddafi threw him out of the airplane. And he was a really, really important, well-respected Shia cleric, who was very important in anti-Israel and anti-imperialist stuff in Lebanon. Right. And that, Gaddafi and him were not getting along. Gaddafi invited him onto his plane, and he was, no one knows whatever happened to him. Now, what happened? I don't know. I don't know what happened. You don't know what happened. Nobody really knows what happened, right? But it doesn't look good for Gaddafi. There are rumors that this cleric, that like Gaddafi's guards thought he was trying to kill Gaddafi, or no one really knows. No one knows what happened. But Gaddafi was a secular Arab nationalist at the time. Gaddafi eventually said he denounced being an Arab and called himself African, which is a really big deal. In the 1990s, Gaddafi said, "I'm no longer an Arab nationalist, I'm an Africanist," which was, he had his African pivot, which was a very, very big deal. And, it's kind of amazing what Gaddafi, I really admire Gaddafi in many, many ways. And one of the things he did in the 90s is he said, "I'm no longer an Arab nationalist, I'm an Africanist." And he said, "I'm aiming toward Africa." He said his goal was to establish an independent African bank. He said that any African could come to Libya and would be given a job guaranteed. But in the 70s, Gaddafi was an Arab nationalist. He called himself an Arab, and he was aligning himself with Ba'athist Arab socialism, and Saddam Hussein and Hafez Assad, and all of that. He changed his position in the 1990s, but he was calling himself a secular Arab nationalist. And Iran is a Islamist religious government. So they had they were on opposite sides. Okay. Iran is a religious Shia Muslim government. Gaddafi was a secular Arab nationalist. And so they were already on opposite sides. Not exactly, Gavin. Not in the Middle East. For the Middle East, he was very, very secular. Okay. Yes, especially in the 90s, Saddam Hussein, Assad, in the 90s, especially, to kind of not have opposition to them, a lot of the secular leaders of the Middle East became more and more religious in the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, especially, and because of the Muslim Brotherhood and all of that, especially in the 90s, all the governments of the Middle East became way more Islamic, because Islamism was such a big movement, right? And that, a lot of people were influenced by Islamism and the Muslim Brotherhood. But in terms of the political spectrum in the Middle East, and especially in the 1970s, Gaddafi was considered very, very secular. And because of that, he was kind of from the opposite spectrum. And it looks like he killed this cleric. We don't know exactly what happened. And, there are some theories that it wasn't really Gaddafi's fault, that, that like the guards thought he was trying to kill him or something like that. But the Shia Muslims of Lebanon immediately turned Musa al-Sadr into a martyr, had protests against the Libyan embassies and stuff. And that, this is how the imperialists work. They try to draw rivers of blood between various anti-imperialist forces. And Gaddafi, as a secular Arab nationalist at that time, and the Shia clerics, right before the Islamic Revolution, that were gaining a lot of influence, there was a river of blood between them at that point. And so the Gaddafi and Iran were never very friendly. Now, Gaddafi did defend Iran against the allegations that they were getting nuclear weapons, etc. And, Gaddafi generally took anti-imperialist positions. He generally took anti-imperialist positions. So, but there was tension there, right? And the other thing about Gaddafi was, I don't know. Okay. I wasn't there, and all of this stuff was exaggerated, right? And this was a big part of like the Obama thing, right? This is something, right? So, like if the Republicans don't like a leader, they accuse them of being a terrorist, right? Of funding terrorism. They accuse them of having a dictatorship and not allowing people to have freedom. If Obama and the liberals don't like a leader, they accuse them of living a luxurious life and of being sexist and homophobic and anti-gay. It's just a weird thing. It's just like liberal CIA versus the Pentagon, right? And so the Pentagon, they're fighting terrorists, so he funds terrorists, and they're fighting for freedom, so he's a dictator. And the CIA says, oh, you're corrupt, and all your relatives live in a palace and live in a mansion, and you are not a feminist, and you oppress gays. And, the narrative against Gaddafi was, first of all, I was enraged because I've read the Green Book. The Green Book is amazing. It's a brilliant, brilliant piece of writing. And in the Green Book, there are like 2 paragraphs that you could argue are sexist. It says women can't do the same jobs as men because they menstruate. But he wrote it in 1978 in the Middle East at a time that, like, in a lot of those countries, women weren't allowed to drive cars. Okay. And so he's basically saying women should get education. Women should be able to vote. Women should run for office. Women should be in the army. And there's like one paragraph that says women shouldn't work in construction because they menstruate, and that might not work by carrying heavy things or something stupid like that. Okay. When the USA was attacking Libya, they did pieces on NPR about Gaddafi has this book he wrote called The Green Book, and it's all about how women are inferior to men because they menstruate and can't be construction workers. It's like, that's not, it's just such a misrepresentation. And, homosexuality was illegal in Libya, right? It's illegal in pretty much every Middle Eastern country, but it's also illegal in Libya. And it's illegal to be gay in Libya. And it was not enforced, and there were gay bars and stuff, but, whatever, right? So it's illegal to be gay in Libya. Women menstruate, and he has like a paragraph about women, So the talking points in American media against Gaddafi were he's sexist, he's homophobic, and he was rich. Well, he's the president of a huge Arab, oil-rich country. And Gaddafi was quite wealthy, but he really took care of his people. Every person, every family, when you got married, you got $20,000 as your marriage bonus from the Libyan government, which, in America, $20,000, maybe it's not that much, right? Maybe that's, it's still a huge amount of money, but in Libya, in a developing country, can you imagine every couple, you get married, your marriage happens, and the government cuts you a check for 20 grand, which is a huge amount of money. Every family, every single one, no matter what, right? Amazing, right? Every Libyan got like an oil stipend. They got like universal basic income, basically. Well, for being a Libyan, you get, so much money. I mean, he really, really took care of his people. He built the great man-made river, the world's largest irrigation system. He electrified the country. He was trying to get the reason he built the world's largest irrigation system is they wanted to achieve food independence. They didn't want to have to import their food. So he was enabling all kinds of Libyans to start their own farms and businesses. I mean, he really, really took care of the Libyan people. They had the highest life expectancy on the African continent, right? The highest. Like, nobody on the African continent was living as long as they did. Education was guaranteed. And if they couldn't give you free education in Libya, they paid for you to go to Japan, or they paid for you to go to America and study. I mean, it was like, but Gaddafi lived a life of luxury, no question about it. And he had wild parties. Muslims are not supposed to drink, but I think he drank, right? I think they drank alcohol, and I think he had some pretty wild parties with Billy Carter, and and I mean, he lived a kind of a luxurious life. And like, I think for one of his kids' birthday parties, he flew in, like Miley Cyrus or somebody like that. I mean, that kind of thing goes on among our leaders. I mean, I think Chelsea Clinton probably had some, amazing, Hollywood stars come and sing at her birthday party. I don't really care. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, and it's like, so the media was all about, oh my God, Gaddafi, he has film stars come to his kids' birthday parties, and he has wild parties where they drink beer and listen to music. And it's like, who cares? Like, he's not going to Epstein's Island, you know what I'm saying? I don't think he was ever on Epstein's Island like our Western leaders were. Maybe that's what he should have done. He shouldn't have had Miley Cyrus come to his daughter's birthday party. Instead, he should have gone to Epstein's Island. Then we would all like him. It's just like, it was stupid, right? And this is the Panama Papers, right? But this is part of the narrative that Western media has, right? This is part of the narrative. It's like, it's like they dig into, it's like, do you think that do you think that like the president of China, do you think Xi Jinping's kids don't live well? I think they will. They probably do. Right. I know Hugo Chavez's daughter was living in New York City. And they claimed, it was all over the internet, that she was a billionaire. and she sued and won money for defamation. She is not a billionaire. Hugo Chavez's daughter has fled Venezuela. And, you know, she doesn't get along with Maduro's folks, and she lives in New York City, but she is not a billionaire. Not at all. And she won money from newspapers that were claiming she's a billionaire. She's not. But her dad was the president of Venezuela. And her dad presided over Venezuela renationalizing its oil. And, you know, and when the oil, I mean, do you think she's not, you know, she's not well taken care of? I mean, you know, and it's just like, so the Panama Papers that came out, right? It was this whole thing about, oh my God, these people, the leader of these countries, they're, you know, they live in luxury while their people are starving. And it's like, you know, I mean, it's selective outrage. Let me just put it that way. It's selective, and it's like, you know, it's propaganda, but that was the narrative against Gaddafi, right? You know, I don't know how we got on that, but yeah, that was the narrative against Gaddafi, was that, you know, that he, you know, he was, and that was part of the narrative that the rural people that were more Islamic were being incited against him, was he had a Russian girlfriend. He may have had a Russian girlfriend. Not my business. I don't care, right? I don't think Gaddafi was a good leader because of his sex life, you know? I mean, he had beautiful female bodyguards, you know? I mean, he's famous for that. I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know. I mean, is it good, bad? I don't know. He had these bodyguards who protected him, who were really good looking, and apparently were really well trained too. I mean, they weren't just good looking. They weren't just eye candy. They were really well trained. He had these beautiful bodyguards who protected him. And, you know, and I mean, apparently he had a Russian girlfriend, or maybe he didn't. I don't know. And I don't care, you know? But anyhow, how did we get talking about this? How did we get talking about this? What, I was making some kind of point, but anyway, during the Arab Spring, right, the narrative was that, you know, these leaders are corrupt, they're not following Islam or whatever. So Iran was trying to get a foothold in that. That's what the Islamic awakening. They tried to frame, you know, the Arab Spring as like an opportunity for the Middle East to get back to Islam. And in Yemen, it worked. Actually, you know, the Houthis, Ansar Allah, would not be in power in Yemen if it wasn't for the Arab Spring. And actually, in one country, it actually worked. Which is that, you know, during the Arab Spring protests, the young people that were like liberals that were protesting against Saleh, the dictator of Yemen, the Houthis, which are strict Shia Muslims, provided security for their demonstrations. They became like the security guards, the armed guards to protect the demonstrations. And that ultimately the Houthis are in power. Ansar Allah, it actually worked. Everywhere else, it didn't work. You know, in Bahrain, you know, and in Bahrain, you could argue it worked to some degree. I mean, they're not in power, but Bahrain, right, is a majority Shia Arab country, but they have a king, a Sunni king, imposed on them by Saudi Arabia. So all the Arab countries are revolting against corruption and all of that, and the people of Bahrain that are Shia Muslims went out and rebelled, and they drove the king. The king had to flee, and then Saudi Arabia invaded Bahrain to brutally repress, you know, to reinstall, and killed thousands of people. But, you know, and in Bahrain, you know, Iran was able to gain, they already had a significant foothold among the protesters and among the population. And they really, you know, the population, they were able to kind of make the most of the Arab Spring. You know, and then CNN did a documentary about the brutal repression of the Bahraini uprising, and they had a whole crew that went and filmed everything, and then they never aired it. Saudi Arabia was able to use their influence to crush it, and it never aired. And that just shows you again the selective outrage, right? That, you know, this is a whole country that has an uprising, overthrows a king in the name of democracy, and then Saudi Arabia invades the country, reinstalls the king, kills thousands of people, lots of beheadings, you know, torture, abducting people, all kinds of stuff. And CNN does a documentary about it because, hey, we're fighting for freedom, human rights. Oh, but Saudi Arabia invests a lot of money in America. Whoopsie daisy, we forgot about that. I mean, it just shows you how hypocritical they are. You know, but, you know, I mean, Iran was trying to gain a foothold among the Arab Spring because they're Islamists, they're Shia Islamists. And, you know, they even tried, they had meetings, from what I understand, with, Mohammed Morsi, when he took power in Egypt. And they said to him, you need to build, you know, community assemblies to back up your revolution. You need to do this, that. And he didn't want to do that. Mohammed Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood president of Egypt, who was elected after the Egyptian revolution, He didn't want to do that. And then the military overthrew him. And, now the military is back in power in Egypt. And that's that. Mohammed Morsi, and, the Muslim Brotherhood, that was a whole mess. I could talk about another time, but anyway, I lived through all of this. And so you're asking me my thoughts on the Arab Spring. Having lived through all of this, I can tell you what actually happened. And there you go. Gavin asked a question: books about the algorithm and its deceptions. That would be good, right? If someone did a study of social media manipulations and all of that. I don't know any books about the algorithm and its deceptions because it's such a recent topic, right? That's such a good topic too. Books about social media manipulation and stuff like that. Wow, I don't know any, actually. But that sounds like a really good topic. There was a woman that I used to know. I don't know if she's still doing stuff. Helen of Destroy, she called herself, and she did a huge amount of investigation into how Wikipedia was rigged. Helen Bunitsky was her name, right? Helen of Destroy. I wonder if she's still doing stuff. She had a lot about Wikipedia manipulation. I haven't heard from her in a few years, but for a while I was hearing from her. Yeah. But I remember, and she did an episode with Chris Hedges on that topic as well. Yeah, wonder what she's up to. She had a lot of good stuff on that, on how Wikipedia is rigged. But yeah, I'm not seeing her. I'm seeing like one lecture she gave. Was it Helen? Her name was Helen Boynitsky, right? I think years ago she was Helen Boynitsky. All right, let me see if she's got any stuff out there now. Yeah, she's just kind of an independent journalist, I guess. Yeah, she was writing articles for RT at one point. She still follows me. Okay, all right. So she still exists. Yeah, Helen of Destroy did a huge amount. Helen Bunitsky, Helen of Destroy, and she's still on Substack. She did a lot on this topic, specifically about Wikipedia manipulation. That's her X account. Helen of Destroy, Helen Bunitsky is her name. And she has a Substack, Helen of Destroy Substack. And yeah, she doesn't, she seems to be tweeting. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, she's out there. So, I've seen some good work that she's done on this issue. But yeah, I wish I knew more. I wish I had more on that. All right. Because nowadays with AI, my goodness, AI can do almost anything. And so, it's worth thinking about. So yeah. Wild times, wild times. Yeah. So thank you, Gavin. I wish I could give you more of an answer. I wish I had more of an answer on that question, but yeah, that's one name that comes to mind, on that point. All right. Well, I don't see any super chats, but there is a Rumble rant, and it's Penny. And she says, I met a young Army vet who just returned from Korean training soldiers at the DMZ. I wonder what he's been taught about DPRK. CPI Juche study is deep stuff, and that's tomorrow night, right? Tomorrow night, we'll have session number 10 of the American Juche Study Group. Hooray! Noah's been doing a great job leading the American Juche Study Group. And we're going to have session number 10. So tune in on this channel. It's going to be great. We're studying the Juche ideology, and we're making our way through the book pretty quickly. So volume 2 is going to have to come out pretty soon. Yeah, session number 10 of the American Juche Study Group will happen tomorrow night. So make sure to join us for that. The sessions are getting better, I will say. And every session, it goes in very interesting places. We study Juche for an hour. We read one of the essays. Noah gives kind of a presentation. And we have discussion, and, Jessica comes on, and Gavin's been on, and I'm always there kind of running the slideshow. And it's a really great endeavor CPI has undertaken, the American Juche Study Group. So I hope you will come study the Juche ideology of North Korea with us next week. That will be a lot of fun. That will be a lot of fun. All right. Well, tell you what, folks, it's almost midnight here, but a lot of people are watching. And so I'm going to put on some music. I want to give a last chance to answer any questions. So if anyone wants to send any questions, this will be your last chance to send questions. Best way to send it is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. You can also do super chats. You can also do Rumble rants. Send any questions you got for me to answer. And I will put on some music. And if anyone has any last minute questions, please go ahead. Let me put on some music. I'll put on a song while I wait for you all to send those questions. And then, I'll answer any questions that come in, and then we'll be done. What song should I put on? What song should I put on? Not a song I've played about 1,000,000 times, right? I want to do a song I haven't done many times. You know what? I am going to put on a Mormon hymn honoring Joseph Smith after his martyrdom called Praise to the Man. It's to the tune of Scotland the Brave, but they took the lyrics of Scotland the Brave and they made it in honor of Joseph Smith after he was killed. And I actually find it to be a great song. So we're going to put on Joseph Smith, the Mormon hymn, Praise to the Man, and then I'll answer any questions. So go to buymeacoffee.com and send your questions after we watch Praise to the Man, the Mormon hymn honoring Joseph Smith.
Around 5 in the afternoon, an armed mob overpowered the jailer, rushed the stairs, and fired shots into the east bedroom. Hiram was the first to fall from an assassin's bullet. Bending over the body of his lifeless brother, Joseph sobbed, "Oh, dear brother Hiram." As Joseph moved toward the window, 2 bullets hit him from the doorway, and 2 struck him from the outside. He fell from the window to the ground below and was heard to exclaim, "O Lord, my God!" Joseph, the prophet of God, was dead. But the work of the prophet lives on, for Joseph left a fame and a name that cannot be slain.
Joseph Smith, the prophet and seer of the Lord, has done more, save Jesus only, for the salvation of men in this world than any other man that ever lived in it. He lived great, and he died great in the eyes of God and his people. And like most of the Lord's anointed in ancient times, has sealed his mission and his works with his own blood.
Last is
So there you go. That's some classic American Latter-day Saints music. So anybody got any questions? Any questions? I don't see any buy me a coffees. I don't see any Rumble rants. I do think Cynthia McKinney's book on Libya is outstanding. Cynthia McKinney is just awesome in so many ways. She's just a really, really awesome, tremendous individual. I really appreciate Cynthia McKinney in many, many ways. But yeah, I don't see any further questions. So I guess we'll call it a night. Right? It's a little bit after midnight. So I will say join us tomorrow night for Juche Study Group. If you would like to join us at our national 7-day program in Chicago, it's going to be great. We're in the process of getting everything in order for it, moving ahead, right? It always feels good when we have another step towards getting things done. So if you want to join us for our national 7-day training program about anti-imperialism, from a drop to an ocean, please register. The registration link is here. Make sure to tune in on Friday when I join the Jimmy Dore Show. Talk to Keaton on the Jimmy Dore Show. That's going to be fun. We're always doing good stuff. I really need to get a haircut. My hair is starting to get long. I just haven't had the time to get to the barber, but hopefully I can get to the barber and get my hair cut. So all right, I'm going to put on the closing music. Thank you, everyone, and we'll be back. We'll be back. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.